Tyrone Thompson at talkrealsolutions.com are the views of Tyrone Thompson and do not reflect the views of talkrealsolutions.com, YouTube, or etc. The content here belongs to Talk Real Solutions and its many contributors. Views and opinions expressed by all
Q&A session has started.
and not talkrealsolutions.com or Tyrone Thompson, the host, or etc. All data and information provided on the site is for informational purposes only. Talk Real Solutions makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information on this site and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis.
All right. What's up, y'all? Hey, it's me again, Howard. I'm just here to continue a little bit of the my Black Western section, which is I really like. I kind of love Westerns. I grew up on Westerns. My grandmother loved Westerns, and at the time that my parents, now y'all check this out, at the time my parents and grandparents were looking at Westerns, I had no idea about black cowboys, the West, and the whole thing of how former slaves came out West and really got into this whole different culture that was going on out West. I had no friggin' idea, right? I just loved Westerns. I loved the whole deal, the whole thing about Westerns, looking at the Westerns, and you got this great character. Hold on a second. Okay, cool. So I had no idea that my people were involved in that culture out west, because at the time when I grew up in the 70s, I was a young kid born in 72. I had no idea that black men and women were cowboys and functioned out west. People ran away from the South, went west, and so I had no idea. I just know I liked the dude that was a bad SOB and was shooting up everybody and doing his thing, quick draw and all that stuff. I liked it. I liked it. It spoke to me as a young kid, and we all like heroes and stuff, and I think that's kind of what kind of made me, I liked it. It was relatable for me. I wanted to be one of those guys on the TV screen. So that's why I kind of want to bring this to the people, for those that may not know, and even for those that know, for nostalgia reasons. And hey, we can take a break from Donald Trump. We can take a break from the politics and just kind of have some entertainment and learn some stuff at the same time, which is important to me. I love learning. And I love being entertained too. I love movies, plays. I love museums. I love all that type of stuff. Oftentimes my family doesn't agree with me on things. They don't look at it in the same context. I look at things like, hey, when King Tut's exhibit came to Seattle, made a point. We're going. And we did. And they liked that with me. But when we went to the Met Museum in New York, man, I could have stayed in that museum for a couple of days. That is the best museum I've ever been in my life. And uh, so I like that type of stuff. History. I love history. History can be very entertaining. And that's what I want to do with the people tonight is kind of give a little history and a little entertainment about Bass Reeves. And what I'm going to do, if you guys give me a second, and if anyone was listening, with Bass Reeves was a brother. I think he was born 1838. He was an American law enforcement official, historically noted as the first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi River. He worked mostly in Arkansas and Oklahoma Territory. During his long career, he had on his record more than 3,000 arrests of dangerous fugitives. Now, and shot and killed 14 of them in self-defense. Now, when I look at those numbers, dude had 3,000 arrests, 3,000 arrests of felons. Man, that is a lot. That is a whole lot. It doesn't say how long his career was, but 3,000 arrests. Goddamn, the brother died in 1910, I think it was. A great lawman, probably the greatest lawman that they don't talk about, is my brother Bass Reeves. So I want to get into the story. He was born in Arkansas. Hey, that's where my father's from. My father was born in Arkansas, so maybe I got a little, maybe I'm leaning towards him a little bit. But we'll see. I'm very interested to get into the story. And what I'll do and what I need to tell you guys is that I'm gonna play this story and I will have to break it up into pieces so YouTube won't hopefully they don't do their thing. And in that time I will be open for any questions. You press 1. Hopefully I can see it on this new board. You press 1, you can ask any questions, then we'll get back into a story. It's only about 30 minutes. Unfortunately, when Tyrone downloads this shit, it comes with commercials, which is kind of strange to me. I've never downloaded anything that comes with commercials, but unfortunately this does. So I have to try to fast forward through those too. Like I said, it's only about 30, well, no, maybe more than that, like 40 something minutes. I'll try to stop it every 5-10 minutes. Just give a couple of comments, take calls and questions if you guys have any questions. And so, yeah, cool. So without further ado, we are going to get into the story of Mr. Bass Reeves. And believe me, guys, this story is very interesting. So we'll start it up right now.
Cartier, Rolex, Gucci, Prada, Jordan, Adidas, Bottega Veneta. At eBay, it's real or it's getting the fake out. eBay's team of luxury sneakerheads, handbags examined
in a legitimate studio space, and we have not seen the inside of one of these in many years.
Shows available on the iHeart.
Technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, or
The
The prairie of the Indian Territory will soon be bright green, almost glowing with new life. A black
network to create the thrill of possibility, a community impact.
decent or kind man. He's quick to goes over onto nearby grazing
guys
lands.
got it.
45. The year is 1883. The last days of winter are giving way to spring. The prairie of the Indian Territory will soon be bright green, almost glowing with new life. A black preacher named Reverend William Stewart tends his land. He owns this farm spread, located in the Chickasaw Nation. The Reverend plans to burn off what remains of winter. It's common prairie management, something his native neighbors have long used to prepare for spring. But the Reverend's intentional grass fire burns out of control. Soon it crosses over onto nearby grazing lands. 45 cowboys work that land. They're a mix of native, black, and white cowboys. The foreman's name is Jim Webb. He's not a decent or kind man. He's quick to anger and he's prone to violence. He's also a bigot. As fast-spreading wildfire burns into the soft hills of grass, Jim Webb saddles up and rides hard over to Reverend Stewart's farm. There's little either man can do now. He dismounts and confronts the preacher. He spits hot words in the black Reverend's face. The Reverend takes it for a while, since he's the forgiving sort. But when he tries to calm the cowboy's anger, Webb flies into a white-hot rage. He will tolerate no backtalk. He kills the black preacher. And then Jim Webb leaves the black man of God lying dead on the prairie, surrounded by the burning grass fire. A federal warrant is issued for the Reverend's murderer. The lawman, Bass Reeves, is given the writ. In charge of dispensing law and order in the Indian Territory, Bass Reeves was the first black man hired to be a U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. Before Deputy Marshal, he'd been a tracker and guide in the Indian Territory. He knows the land, he knows the people. Plus, he speaks a few of the languages of the...
Hold on a second. This anonymous, what does that mean? Damn it. Who is it? Did you press 1, anonymous caller? I don't know who you are.
I surely hope I did.
Oh, you did press 1?
Indeed, I did.
Okay, I wasn't sure. You know, this board is new to me, so I wasn't particularly sure that you pressed 1.
By, man, ready to talk about my man, one of my all-time heroes, brother Bass Reeves.
Okay, cool.
United States Marshal.
Exactly. A great man, right?
Oh, man, one of the greatest of the West.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you calling in, brother.
Lawmen, anyway, when it comes to lawmen who are absolutely crucial in making the West civilized, he has to rank among the top 5.
Okay.
If not number 1, he's certainly in the top 5.
Okay, well, I'm going to get back into it, Sarge. Chime in whenever you want to, brother. And I'm actually going to go back a little bit.
Right now, I'll wait till you finish that clip.
But if you want to say something.
I don't want to interrupt nothing, man,
No, if you want to say something, because the clip needs to be interrupted so we don't get knocked off.
I'll let you decide the cues for that. You're playing it.
Okay, well, I'll rewind it a little bit, and then we'll get back into it. Well, thanks for showing up, Sarge. I know this is your guy. So
this is the guy, man. This man deserves every tribute you can think of to make to him, man.
All right.
If anybody does, it's Bass Reeves, man. We don't give tributes to George Floyd, damn it. We're going to give some tributes to Bass Reeves, okay?
Oh, okay.
All
okay,
right.
I got you.
Damn right.
All right, well, let me get back into it.
He's the forgiving sort. But when he tries to calm the cowboy's anger, Webb flies into a white-hot rage. He will tolerate no backtalk. He kills the black preacher. And then Jim Webb leaves the black man of God lying dead on the prairie, surrounded by the burning grass fire. A federal warrant is issued for the Reverend's murderer. The lawman, Bass Reeves, is given the writ. In charge of dispensing law and order in the Indian Territory, Bass Reeves was the first black man hired to be a U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. Before Deputy Marshal, he'd been a tracker and guide in the Indian Territory. He knows the land, he knows the people. Plus, he speaks a few of the languages of the 5 tribes of the Indian Territory. Above it all, he's fearless. As the biographer of the Indian Territory, D.C. Gideon, wrote in 1901, Bass Reeves, quote, fears nothing that moves and breathes. He has good reason. He's deadly accurate with both his revolvers and his Winchester. He stands 6'2" with his boots off, weighs around 180 pounds. He's a big man, known for his big voice, booming laugh, and good time personality. He can talk, and he likes to. He's particularly fond of his thick black walrus mustache. He knows it makes him distinct. He also always wears a black hat, for the same reason. It makes him recognizable from a distance. Bass Reeves has a strong hunch where to find the outlaw Jim Webb. He starts his manhunt at Bywater's general store. When Webb sees Bass Reeves ride up to the general store, he runs, jumps out of a window. The outlaw takes a Winchester rifle with him and a revolver. He makes a desperate run for his horse. Bass spots his prey fleeing. He spurs his horse and cuts off Jim Webb's escape route. Webb turns and sprints for some tall brush. He makes it about 500 yards. Then he turns and fires his Winchester. It's a fatal mistake. Here is how Bass Reeves recalled the end of Jim Webb.
Before I could drop off my horse, his first bullet cut a button off my coat, and the second cut my bridle rein in 2. I shifted my 6-shooter and grabbed my Winchester and shot twice.
The outlaw Jim Webb falls to the earth, gut shot, but he isn't dead yet. He calls out for Bass Reeves to come closer. Bass was no fool. He tells the gut-shot outlaw to throw off his revolver and rifle into the brush. Webb does as he's ordered. Good to his word, Bass Reeves draws closer. Dying breaths, Jim Webb pays his final respects to the lawman who took his life.
Give me your hand, Bass. You're a brave man. I want you to accept my revolver and scabbard as a present. You must accept them. Take it, for with that I have killed 11 men.
Curiously, when the Arkansas...
Let me stop it right there, because, the Old West has a lot of lore, a lot of, they kind of put more than what really happened. Now, at this point, I don't know, but that sounds really dramatic to me. Hey, take my gun. I've killed 11 men with this. I don't know, but I'm saying that sounds kind of more lore than the truth. I don't know, but I'm going to go to my guy, Sarge. What do you think of that moment there, Sarge? I'm saying, I don't know, but
when it comes to the Old West and all them penny dreadful novels they would do back in that time, almost every famous legendary character involved in the Old West has got some degree of exaggeration, myth, and lore attached to them, without exception. All of them do. That would include Bass Reeves. Some of it inspired by himself. For instance, his great nephew wrote a book about him. He was a federal judge. I forget his nephew's name. I think his name was, Paul L. Brady. He was the first black man appointed as a federal administrative law judge. He wrote a book about his great uncle. And he speaks to the fact that Bass Reeves, now, as I don't know if you've already covered this, but he was born into the family of an Arkansas slave owner, and the slave owner's son, George, I believe George Reeves, inherited him upon the death of his father, and he went to serve as a colonel in the Confederate Army, and he took Bass with him. And Bass said that he fought at the Battle of Pea Ridge, Chickamauga in 1862, and at Missionary Ridge in 1863. Now, Mr. Brady, Reeves' grandson, says there's no doubt that he probably did fight at Pea Ridge on the Confederacy side, I might add. But he really disputes that he fought at Chickamauga and Missionary Ridge because he escaped from his Confederate owner, slave master owner, in 1862. So it might have been, Bass kind of embellishing that a little bit. Right. Again, that's from his great nephew writing this book about his exploits and everything. So you got to understand, you got to be able to separate the fact from the fiction. But the 3,000 arrests are documented, And
right. They're documented. No, I never questioned that.
And certainly the men he killed in self-defense. And the fact that he had no serious injuries in the course of all his activity is also well documented. So everything, believe me, most of it is true. It's just incredible, that's all. But it is true for the most part.
Right. Look, most of where they're getting their information from, I think, comes from his book. And so, yeah, I'm riding with you.
Not just the book now, not just the book. There are records of the federal government in the Arkansas and Oklahoma territories that have these arrests, the disposition of the cases, who is the arresting officer, and so forth. So it's well documented, most of it.
Yeah. No, what I mean by I'm not disputing that. I mean the personal stuff that comes between a man dying and the other man.
Oh, yeah. That's probably blown up. Yeah. I agree with you there. But the fact that he killed him isn't.
That is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to continue on, Sarge. I don't want this to go too long. I'm going to try to play some big chunks because he gets very interesting, actually.
Oh, it's fascinating. I think he is the most fascinating lawman in the Old West, bar none. I think his story is absolutely amazing and worthy of being known by everybody who wants to know anything about the history of the West and black people's role in taming it, settling it, civilizing it, and bringing law to it.
Exactly. Okay,
Him
here
and
we
the
go.
9th and 9th and 10th Cavalry, I guess, are the two best examples I can think of that.
Okay.
Gazette reports this story on July 4th, 1884. There's no mention of Bass Reeves. The shooting death of Jim Webb is left vague. The black lawman is not given credit for killing the white outlaw. It's the same sort of passive language familiar from officer-involved shootings today.
A man named Webb, charged with murder, engaged them in a running fight and was fatally wounded, dying the next day.
Jim Webb was from Texas. He was likely white and a former Confederate soldier, the sort of man who'd want to give an honorable enemy his gun and scabbard. We don't know this for sure. All we know for certain is it was important that the American newspaper reading public never really focus on the fact there was a black lawman shooting white men dead on the prairie. The image of a formerly enslaved black man riding around on horseback with a license to kill tended to make white people uncomfortable.
Some heavy shit.
Over his 32-year career, Bass Reeves claimed to have killed at least 14 men. We can only confirm that Bass Reeves officially killed 5 men, but we have no reason to doubt him. He was a man of his word, not prone to exaggeration or puffery. We just can't corroborate his number with news accounts. But if we do take him at his word that he killed 14 men in gunfights, then there's no debate at all that Bass Reeves was the most lethal lawman in the Wild West. Think of it this way. His record as a gunfighter was 14-0. He was undefeated. No other lawman comes close, black or white. Sorry, Wyatt Earp.
Yeah, this our home. It's been a long road for us. We taking ownership over everything owed to us. Royalty, we surrounded by our heritage. Our fist up, cause we proud to be American.
I'm Zarin Burnett. Welcome to Black Cowboys, an iHeart original podcast.
Hey, ask yourself what's really in the name. Sitting on a Mustang, riding through the plains. Buffalo Soldier, the king of the range. We in love with the cowboy way.
Chapter 3. The Lawman, Bass Reeves. No, Pop, when I was young, you told me about Bass Reeves, and he was this bad, bad man in my mind. He was this formerly enslaved black man who frees himself. He rides around the West, arresting and even shooting white men dead in the name of the law. But I was a boy. That meant something different to me. What did it mean to you as a man, a father, a black man in America?
Bass Reeves had a singular position in my personal history and in my understanding of history. In order to understand Bass Reeves, you have to understand after the Civil War, everything was in flux. Everything had changed. And Bass Reeves had left slavery before the war ended. So he'd made himself free. Then when freedom came to the West, he was ready for it. He was dedicated to freedom and justice as a natural idea in the same way that Stevie Wonder was born to play music. Bass would have been a police officer and a justice person wherever he landed, because that was in him. Bass was amazing at taking people in. He only killed 14 people out of like 3,000 or 4,000 that he arrested. That's not many people. So it wasn't like he was a bloodthirsty, crazy man. It's almost like he had a zeal like a minister has a zeal to be a minister. He had a zeal to be a lawman in the same way.
His mother first began to worry about Bass Reeves when he was a boy. When he worked in the field, he loved to sing songs about murder and outlaws. She wasn't sure where he learned the songs. No one she knew sang them. Bass started his life as the enslaved child property of a white family. He was born sometime in July 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas. He worked the fields as a child, but as he grew bigger, he was picked to be a body man to the son of his owner. He was a mix of a valet and protection. Bass wasn't taught to read, as he'd requested. Instead, he was taught to shoot. This was rare for an enslaved person. He became so skilled with a gun in his hand, his owner entered him into turkey shoot competitions, which Bass typically won. When war broke out, Bass accompanied his master to the Civil War. He claims that he was at the Battle of Missionary Ridge, Chickamauga, and Pea Ridge. There's no record for what a slave was doing in the war. All we have are oral histories. According to oral history, this is when Bass Reeves got free. As the story goes, Bass and his master were playing cards. Some stories say they'd wagered on his freedom, others say they just got into a disagreement. What all the stories agree on is what happened next. Bass Reeves knocks his owner the fuck out, and then he frees himself. He sneaks out of the Confederate camp and he escapes the Civil War. He goes on the run and flees to the Seminole and Creek Nation in present-day Oklahoma. For the remainder of the war, he stays there. He soon learns the Muskogee language of the Creek and Seminole. He also learns to speak some Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw. They are the 5 tribes of the Indian Territory. Bass Reeves is accepted by the tribes. He learns their land and their ways, becomes a proficient hunter, trapper, guide, and scout. After the war is over, as the nation stitches itself together, it begins to look west. In 1875, President Grant appoints Judge Parker to the bench of the federal court at Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's the official U.S. court for the Indian Territory. He soon becomes known as Hanging Judge Parker, the same man who will twice sentence Cherokee Bill to, quote, hang by the neck until he is dead. He's also a 2-term congressman who served on the House Committee on Indian Affairs. He's sent to restore law and order in the Indian Territory, and he'll need good men to do it. One of the first men the newly appointed Judge Parker hires as a deputy marshal is Bass Reeves. Judge Parker understands the stakes at hand with a black man dispensing justice on the prairie. According to his fellow judge, Paul Brady,
he reminded Bass that he would be in a position as deputy to show the lawful as well as the lawless that a black man was the equal of any other law enforcement officer on the frontier. He convinced Bass to join him in helping to establish the rule of law over the rule of men, and to bring law where there had never been any law before.
Few men of their day would have guessed it, but these 2 men have a lot in common. Not on the surface. One man is a judge, the other man is an illiterate runaway slave. Yet, over their 2 decades of working together, they'll discover they are equally committed to justice, dedicated lawmen, and consequently, they become close friends. Unexpected as it may be, the key is that they can both trust the other to be good at their job and true to their word. They are honorable men in a place overrun with their opposite. As a formerly enslaved man who freed himself, here he is having the chance to not get revenge or vengeance, but he can enact his will on these white people that would have been possibly former enslavers, and yet he doesn't ever enact vengeance that way. He sticks to the letter of the law. Do you find that commendable?
I do. I admire it because he's not letting external factors change his values. He's a fair and just man. So the fact that there are other people who were not fair and just, who had visited their abuse upon him, that didn't change him to be like them. You know, he was still a fair and just man. He could still be trusted to go out and arrest anybody from the judge to his son and bring them back with the same level of integrity. That's unheard of. You know, man, that's not unheard of because he did it, but that's very unusual. That's a level of self-assuredness and belief that could only come from inside of him. You know, nobody taught him any of that. That was in him to do right.
Bass Reeves was a hard man and complex, a perfect fit for the hard, complex place that he called home. A news story published in the early 1900s that was eventually syndicated by the Washington Post described the land as, quote, "There is not in all the United States a place where a deputy marshal is such an important figure as in Indian Territory." According to that same turn-of-the-century news story,
when Reeves commenced riding as deputy marshal, all of Oklahoma and Indian Territory were under the jurisdiction of Fort Smith Court, and the deputies from Fort Smith rode to Fort Reno, Fort Sill, and Anadarko for prisoners, a distance of 400 miles. In those days, the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad running south across the territory marked the western fringe of civilization. 80 miles west of Fort Smith, it was known as the Deadline, and whenever a deputy marshal from Fort Smith or Paris, Texas crossed the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas track, he took his life in his hands and he knew it. When a deputy and his posse man rode out of Fort Smith into the territory, neither he nor his friends knew whether he would ever ride back again.
Bass Reeves never let any fear of what could or might happen cause him to shrink from his duty. He was as fearless as they come, and he preferred to rely on himself and his own wits. Not to mention, he was a recognizable figure on the prairie, a big target. The way to get around his high profile, Bass Reeves loved to slip into a good disguise. He seemed to revel in his undercover work. He could use expectations that others had for black people against them, turn their prejudices to his favor. One time, Bass Reeves went out to search for two outlaw brothers. Word was the men were hiding out somewhere down by the Texas border. Bass Reeves leaves his posse man behind and rides out alone to bring back the bad men to justice. His plan is simple. He'll disguise himself as a tramp, someone they'd never suspect was a lawman. Then, once he's close enough, he'll pull his gun and arrest them. He removes the heels from a pair of busted shoes. He uses an old cane to walk. He gets an old floppy-ass hat. He shoots 3 holes in it. With some carefully applied dirt and stink, he's ready for his game of subterfuge. Then he walks the 28 miles to the outlaw's hideout. When he arrives, the outlaws aren't around. Only their mother is there. Bass changes tactics. Knowing her sons are on the run, he poses as a less fortunate outlaw who's also on the run from a posse, and he begs her for a hot meal. She feels for him and obliges. She invites him in. As he eats, the mother conspires with the undercover lawman, saying, "It would be a good plan that you and my boys join forces so that you can be a protection to one another." The irony is cruel. Sometimes, after darkness falls, the outlaw brothers ride up. They whistle to their mom. When she whistles back to let them know the coast is clear, the brothers ride up to their hideout and dismount. They meet their mother's new addition to their gang. The brothers are fans of their mother's plan. They like Bass. Later that night, when the outlaw brothers and Bass Reeves go to sleep, they're all in the same main room of the cabin. Bass waits until the house is quiet, save for the sounds of 2 sleeping outlaws and their mother. Once the sounds of sleep take hold, Bass springs into action. He sneaks over and handcuffs the outlaws together. Somehow, he doesn't wake them. The next morning, the brothers come to, urged awake by Bass Reeves' boot. He kicks the outlaws awake, and then they learn with a rough shock that they've been captured. Their mother feels cheated and lied to. She follows Bass Reeves and her boys for 3 miles, cussing out the lawman the whole damn time. A deputy marshal's job is a mostly thankless one. Over his...
Now, Sarge, what do you think of that?
Man, I got a
example
couple
there?
of stories for you attesting to what that documentary just said. Now, first of all, you got to remember that it wasn't until 1986, in the ruling of Tennessee versus Garner, that the Supreme Court entertained any idea of what the limitations on the use of deadly force by law enforcement officers was. Prior to that, it was up to the states. Now, to give you an example of how Bass Reeves, because the man was saying he didn't take vengeance, he stuck by the letter of the law as he understood it. And this is what he did in regard to I'm saying about 2 incidents involving Bass Reeves. One of them involved two men that he had warrants for. They were Frank Buck and a guy named John Bruner. Now, it was up the Canadian River, which is a river in Arkansas. It's not in Canada, but it runs up through Arkansas. Comes from Canada down through Arkansas. It's called Canadian River. And he's looking for them, and they chanced upon them, but he didn't know who they were because he didn't have an accurate description of who these men were. But he was asked, they were with a group of other men, and he asked for guides to help locate the two men he's got warrants for. And guess who volunteered to assist them looking for him? The two men he's looking for. So he's got these two guys looking for him, and frankly, they're plotting to knock him off. You understand where I'm coming from? They're going to knock off old Brother Bass. Now, they camped at noon, and when they were eating dinner, Reeves noticed Bruner stealthily drawing his pistol from behind a horse. And this man had great instincts, apparently. He said, he ain't just pulling that gun out to clean it. Something's clicking, and maybe part of the description he already had on him, kind of realizing he had these two men right in his midst. So he went around the horse, used his great strength and ability to fight hand-to-hand to disarm Bruner. And meanwhile, Buck is coming around behind him while he's disarming Bruner and drawing down on him and bringing his pistol down to bear on him. He turned with Bruner's gun still in his hand, and shot Buck dead. But he took Bruner into custody and brought him back to Fort Smith for trial, where he was charged with a couple other offenses along with what he had him for. He didn't kill Bruner. He took him in, even though he had to kill Buck to defend his life. Another incident involved the Brunson brothers, and there were three of them. This guy, the Lone Ranger, Bass Reeves, goes out by himself looking for three desperados, okay? Now, he caught up to them, and they proceeded to taunt him, tell him they're going to kill him. And then Reeves, calmly, like he was prone to do, because this guy apparently one of the few people who's actually fearless. So I guess he wasn't really courageous. He just didn't know what fear was. But
well, he had a good temperament, Sarge. He had a good temperament.
Oh, yeah, he had temperament. Yeah, he was, the word is unflappable, was what he was. So what he did was, these guys talking about they're going to kill him, so he calmly asked them what was the date. And he told, and they asked him, well, what you need to know the date for? I need to know how to date the arrest papers, which says on it whether you were brought in dead or alive. And then he grabbed the barrel of the gun of the guy nearest to him, disarmed him, and then killed the other two brothers who were drawn down on him. They had their guns on him, and he killed them. But he took the brother he disarmed into custody and brought him back in for trial. He didn't just kill him. I mean, this man never sustained any serious injuries, despite the fact that his hat got shot in two. He had buttons shot from his coat. His bridle reins was shot from his hand, but no bullet ever struck his body. He even survived an assassination attempt by an outlaw unknown who almost got him, but he returned fire and drove him off. I don't think they ever found him, but he survived that assassination. He was a man who was known as being incorruptible, fearless, and with a dogged persistence, the like of which is rarely seen in any person, even the most dedicated lawman. So yes, I do believe he was incorruptible as far as doing his duty. I believe he did as best he could, and I believe he did it without any sense of personal vengeance. I think he was one of the most admirable law enforcement officers ever in that sense.
Okay, well, I'll continue on.
32-year career as a lawman, Bass Reeves arrested 3,000 hardened criminals. That's an average of 94 arrests a year, every year, for 32 years. In other words, for 3 decades, he hunted the most desperate men in America. Outlaws willing to kill to stay free. As the turn-of-the-century news story made plain to its readers,
there were 3 principal classes of outlaws: murderers, horse thieves, and bootleggers. Added to the Indians and mixed Negroes and Indians were the white outlaws that had fled from Texas, Kansas, and other states.
Whiskey was illegal in Indian territory. To sneak in whiskey, sometimes cowboys would slide a bottle in their boot, thus the term bootlegger. Profit-minded cowboys were also whiskey runners for the busy whiskey towns, the ones just over the border from Indian nations. When a bootlegger was busted, they were charged with the crime of introducing. That was short for, quote, introducing spirituous liquor in the Indian country. Other than the whiskey runners and moonshiners, the rest of the hard men a deputy marshal dealt with were primarily murderers and horse thieves, and many men were both. And equally, both men knew if they were caught, they could be killed, so they were prepared to fight for their lives. That was the job of a deputy marshal, and largely in the Indian Territory, it fell to black men, like Bass Reeves, or Deputy Marshal Grant Johnson, or even the shady sort of deputy like Ike Rogers, who betrayed the outlaw Cherokee Bill. In the West, the law, or what passed for it, was often a black man with a badge and a gun. This is due to the racial politics of the prairie. The Indian tribes both trust and do not fear black men the way that they mistrust and fear white men. The federal government knows this. They know that a black lawman is more likely to go into Indian Territory and come back alive. This is a central dynamic for justice in the West. We'll dig into how this came to be in a later episode about the black Seminole chief, John Horse. Now, we often talk about the black cop in our modern context, but Bass Reeves is a very different black cop. How do you, as somebody who has had issues with police, respect a man like Bass Reeves?
We wouldn't be at opposite ends of the spectrum. He would be required to arrest me for things I've done, but he wouldn't see them as things that were immoral, unethical. They would just be illegal. That's a different threshold. That's just, okay, the law may change. It was used to be illegal for this, now it's not. So there's room for lawmen and lawbreakers to break bread on areas that are not immoral. My feeling is Bass has a job to do. I want any cop who does his job to do it just the way Bass did, without any consideration for who the citizen is, that everybody should get exactly the same treatment. My anger was always when that wasn't the case. Instead of curbside justice, it would be curbside injustice. And that's not right. Whereas Bass Reeves was the epitome of consistent justice. I don't have any problem with him. My problem with police is the hypocrisy and the refusal to adhere to their own standards. When a police officer kills somebody,
So, Sarge, do you want to comment on that? That was a pretty interesting statement that the brother made about Bass. I kind of agree with it. Good statement. Do you want to comment on that, or you want me to keep on playing?
Well, absolutely, man. I mean, like I said, he was a man that was incorruptible. I think on his tombstone it reads, he had no master but duty. He believed absolutely in duty. And he believed part of his duty was uphold the law as a lawman. And that's the way he saw his job. Let's not forget, he was more than just a lawman. He was also a family man and a father. He married a woman named Nellie Jenny in 1864, and he fathered and he may say married her until her death in 1896. Then he married another woman named Winnie Sumter. And between these two women, he had 11 children. He fathered 11 children. So he was a father, well, family man. So let's not forget that. That's another example this man could set for us. He was a dedicated father, even to the point of, as I'm sure we'll cover, his own son who had a wife.
No. Stop. We gonna get there. Don't go there. Don't go there, sir.
Get that a little bit, but he was definitely a family man. Loved his wife, loved his children, and he was devoted to them as best he could. Because in fact, he was on the road constantly getting criminals, But he definitely was that. That's another example he left as part of his legacy. And again, on his tombstone, I believe it says he had no master but duty. And I mean, I think he's one of the most admirable men I've ever read of in the West, ever.
All right, cool. Well, I'll keep it going. I agree with you so far.
Improperly, they need to go to prison like everybody else who kills somebody improperly. Your job shouldn't protect you from doing improper things.
And in 1886, Bass Reeves has to meet the law head on. That's when the lawman is arrested for murder.
Now, the white man finna try to get in his ass, but let's go.
It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card.
Hold on.
Now through December 25th, get 5% daily cash back on products at Apple with a new Apple Card, including a new iPhone 14 or Apple Watch Ultra.
And worthy of your collection. As experts, they know that
Morgan Wealth Management offers investment products and services through JP Morgan,
in which prisoner tells the story. What all agree on is that Bass Reeves, at the time, was dislodging a shell from his rifle. It was the wrong caliber. He claimed the rifle misfired. His defense is that it was an accident. Either way, intentional or accidental, a bullet caught the cook, a man named Leach, in the neck.
I need to go back.
Bass Reeves' nephew was there that night.
I asked Leach if he was badly hurt, and he said he was. I heard Leach tell the doctor he did not think Bass shot him on purpose.
In which prisoner tells the story. What all
Case branch over the phone or by video chat. Get a free investment checkup from an advisor to see if your portfolio is on track. Learn more at JP Morgan.
He accused of murdering a cook in his posse. He was a cook named William Leach, a black man whom he was accused of murdering. And he said it was an accident, explaining he had a Winchester rifle that was chambered at 44.40 caliber, meaning it had a bore of 40 inches, 44.44 inches, and a length of .40 inches. But he put a 45 caliber bullet into it, and he was trying to pry it out of the chamber. And it being a rimfire, if you know anything about how rimfire cartridges work, his knife set off the rimfire cartridge probably when he pierced it while he was prying, trying to get the oversized cartridge out of the chamber. And that's how he probably shot the person.
The moral of this is they tried to get your boy. They tried to get your hero. They were finna get him for murder. But let's go into it. You're absolutely right, Sarge. Let's go into it. They were finna get his ass. Because you know them white people didn't like this dude arresting all these white people. You know that, Sarge.
Well,
so they tried to get him.
I mean, but think about it for a minute now. Here's a man who is probably the most proficient individual with firearms in the Old West. Everybody knows his ability to know his firearms backwards and forwards. In the story that he would have an accident, I can understand why people might think that was incredible. Although I do also understand your point as well. So I'm not going to, out of hand, say the only reason they wanted to go after him was because he was a black man, even though that certainly is credible to say. But, I mean, remember, this guy was an expert marksman and an expert in handling firearms.
Okay. Well, let's get into it. But they tried to get our boy for murder. That's a fact.
Morgan.com/advice. JP Morgan Wealth Management offers investment products and services through JP Morgan Securities, LLC. Member FINRA/SIPC.
Howard. Yeah.
What's that?
Let that run, let them mute it until it comes back up again. But look, yeah, but they definitely tried to get him for murder of this black cook. Clearly, he had no animus toward this man. So they would have to ask themselves, why would he want to deliberately kill this man? He's got an exemplary record as a lawman, not killing outlaws who tried to kill him and take him in. He took outlaws who tried to kill him and brought him into custody. Why would he kill this inoffensive cook who cooks for his posse?
Okay, I got you. Well, let's let him get into it, Sarge.
Go ahead.
Bass Reeves stands accused of murdering his cook after a fight. It's alleged that the cook poured hot grease down a dog's throat to get back at Bass Reeves for an earlier incident. Or the dog was the cook's and Bass Reeves threatened to kill it. It depends on which prisoner tells the story. What all agree on is that Bass Reeves, at the time, was dislodging a shell from his rifle. It was the wrong caliber. He claimed the rifle misfired. His defense is that it was an accident. Either way, intentional or accidental, a bullet caught the cook, a man named Leach, in the neck. Bass Reeves' nephew was there that night.
I asked Leach if he was badly hurt, and he said he was. I heard Leach tell the doctor he did not think Bass shot him on purpose. They'd always been perfectly friendly. I'd been with Bass and Leach on the trip about 2 months, and I'd never heard a cross word between them.
When the shooting happened in 1884, it was deemed an accident. But between then and when Bass Reeves was arrested for it 2 years later, something curious was going on in the country, something that would change the way that justice is served in America forevermore.
Oh, Sarge.
What was your conception of the West and the end of the West and the tragedy of what was lost at that time?
It was complete. It went from a place that had a bright future. They were creating towns. They were creating futures for themselves. They were creating places for their families. They believed in what they were doing. And then when Rutherford Hayes cut that deal to win the election, that set everything in motion, because part of the agreement was they're going to take the Union Army out and Reconstruction. And that didn't happen in one day. The agreement happened in one day. But it took about 20 years for them to fully accomplish the removal and replacement of the systems that had been put in by the Freedmen's Bureau and by the newly elected Congress. So it took from 1877 to 1897 before they really finished it. And 1896 was the Plessy versus Ferguson case, which was separate but equal. So that finished the work of turning around Reconstruction. That was the punctuation. But it took a long time because all the white people in those states were not in favor of doing it. A lot of people were pleased that slavery was over, that now we can go back to being decent people. And then decent people then go on about their business and start doing their work. And then the evil people get together and make deals. And that's what they did. And they got together and then they just one by one took over the state legislatures. They compromised people. The Ku Klux Klan went berserk, and the North turned their heads. The northern states turned their heads away for any number of reasons, all of which were low down, unworthy. But the net result of that was that when Reconstruction ended, then the possibilities of the West ended.
While we often focus on Rutherford B. Hayes.
Now, Sarge, that brother said a lot there. I know you may not agree, but he said a lot of true stuff there, Sarge. And what he's saying is that with the changing of things and how, there's a lot of stuff going on, basically what he's saying is, man, they was after a brother like that was doing what he was doing because they wanted to bring in their own type of deal, and they were gunning for him. That's what I got from that, Sarge. Do you agree or disagree with that? That's
an argument to make. After all, but he was a U.S. Marshal. He wasn't a state official. He was a U.S. or local official. He was a U.S. Marshal. So I guess that might have added to their desire to get him because, he didn't answer to local or state authority. He answered to a federal judge. And but look, the Union knew they could not keep the states under federal Reconstruction forever. There was a corrupt bargain they entered into with the states to obviate the civil rights and the constitutional rights of black people in Confederate states, because that's wrong. They had the 14th Amendment. It was passed in 1868. Reconstruction ended in about 1876 officially with the Rutherford Hayes Agreement.
Right. That's what they're going to go into. That's what they're going to go into right now. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But they couldn't keep the Confederate States under federal jurisdiction forever. I mean, at some point it had to end. The problem was it wasn't supposed to end then because the southern states where it was enacted were not willing to fully grant citizenship rights to the black people in their states. It shouldn't have ended in 1876. Now, if it had been able to keep for a few years longer, maybe to 1880, things might not have gone the way they did. You might not have had the terrorist wing of the Democrat Party, the Ku Klux Klan, able to take over when it did. But it happened the way it happened, and yes, we are stuck with the results of it.
Okay.
Southern states were definitely not ready to admit black people in a full citizenship in the old Confederacy. There's no doubt about that.
Right. And they definitely wasn't ready. But sorry, check this out. And they definitely wasn't ready for a black federal lawman locking up white men and killing white men. They definitely wasn't ready. So they were going to get in his ass, Sarge. Am I right or wrong?
Well, you're right about that.
They wasn't feeling it. They wasn't feeling it.
But again, he had a ready-made defense. Like you said, it was an accident. He was prying an oversized cartridge that wasn't meant for the rifle he had out of the gun. It was a rimfire. Those guns were rimfire cartridges. And when you pry on the primer is located on the rim of the cartridge. When you pry on them with a knife, there's a possibility you will detonate the primer and set off the cartridge. He had injuries, from the detonating cartridge firing out of battery because the bolt wasn't in battery when it went. So he got minor injuries to his hands and powder burns from that. That was, even though he was tried later, that was part of the things he raised at trial.
Okay.
Because those injuries were consistent with the gun detonating out of battery because he set off the primer by prying on the cartridge rim where the primer of a rimfire cartridge is located.
But, okay. But what I'm saying, Sarge, is what I see at this time, and we're about halfway through the story, you guys, and I know I'm sorry for breaking it up so much, but what I see at this time is they already trying to take the greatest lawman in the history of the West. They already trying to take him out. Already.
Well, you can
if you guys want to call in, hold on, sorry. Let me get this out of it. If you guys want to call in, the number is 717-908-1834. You have to put in the participant code, which is 917324. Press the pound button after that, and then press *6 1 to speak. And I will open your lines. I know it's on Q&A right now. This is Sarge. This is Sarge's favorite guy, Bass Reeves. One of my favorites, too. But I understand there's a lot of political things going on with him. That's kind of what we're talking about right now. Great lawman, but politically, the government, they were getting after his ass. And I think that's where we're at in the story right now. They accused him of murder, and that's where we're at right now. Sarge seems to believe that maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
No, I'm not going to dismiss your case either at all. It was 78 or whatever that year.
Yeah,
believe me,
yeah,
I am not
so.
going to dismiss your case. But I'm saying, let's say I'm going to concede fully to your hypothesis. Concede fully. The reason they wanted to get him was because he was a black man who was locking up white criminals and proved to be the best at it in territories, if not the entire United States. Okay, but
absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
That is also a backhanded testament to his excellence and his incorruptibility. Because if he was just a compliant black man, maybe they wouldn't have been so eager to go after him now, would they?
Okay, no, we on the same page. They were after his ass because he was a damn good lawman, and he was locking up some of their white people, and he might have killed, 14. So I don't know how many of that 14 were white, but
he killed black man, he killed white man, he locked up black man, he locked up whoever had a warrant for him and was a fugitive, he went after him. So he didn't make no distinctions.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get back into it, Sarge. But yeah, me and you kind of on the same page, but they was after his ass, and that's the fact. And this is,
I'm a grand
that's the first. Yeah, this is the first time that we're getting into it in this story that they were like, they trying to get him. On an accidental shooting, they were trying to get his ass. But let's get back.
You cannot completely disregard an expert marksman, thoroughly skilled in the use of firearms, having an accidental discharge. I know it can happen. It happened to me, and I am expert with firearms, but I'm just saying, it did serve as a basis that at the very least needs to be investigated. Was this actually an accident? Did he have any animus? No, they shouldn't have charged him once he explained how it happened. Because, knowing what I know about guns, that's entirely credible that it could have happened that way.
Okay. Well, let's get back into it, Sarge. Like I said, we motored halfway through. Let's get in.
his Compromise of 1877 as the end of Reconstruction, the spark of Lincoln-inspired hope for racial progress in America that was articulated at the end of the Civil War, that last flicker actually died in 1884 with the election of Grover Cleveland. He was the first Democrat president elected since the Civil War. His election signaled the final death knell of any remaining hopes of a restoration of America's commitment to its founding idealism. And it marked the true end of the more earthbound goals of equality brought about by Reconstruction. Following the election of President Cleveland, lynchings of Black Americans went up dramatically. Hate crimes in general spiked. The mood of the country changed. There was a new dominant key of resentment aimed at the recent racial advancements. This nationwide sea change was equally felt in the Indian Territory. The newly elected President Cleveland appoints a new U.S. Marshal, John Carroll, a former Confederate soldier. Now that he's the chief lawman in the Indian Territory, acting on his direction, Commissioner Stephen Wheeler of Fort Smith charges Bass Reeves on the 2-year-old murder rap. Many suspect the charges are racially motivated, and the legal process seemed to be that way too. Bass Reeves recalls a run-in that he had with one of his white jurors.
He said, "Yes, I am a juryman, and if you want to save your neck, you'd better make a statement to me." I told him again I had no statement to make. He then said, "You damn black son of a bitch, I'm just as certain to break your neck as I have this cane in my hand. Me and 3 others got it in for you."
Witnesses to the exchange affirm Bass Reeves' recollection of events. Judge Parker ordered the juror to appear before him or be held in contempt of court. The juror is eventually excused, and the Bass Reeves murder trial carries on.
Now, this is something that's never told when we talk about the story of Bass Reeves, how the government tried to take him down through a murder trial. Now, Sarge, I don't want you to speak because I'm going to let it play, but I just wanted to get this out there. This is not told a lot about how the United States government, through their federal marshals, tried to get his ass on a funky-ass murder. They was, and you got a damn juror talking about, "You need to talk to me." What? That's white privilege at its best. Y'all check this shit out. They trying to take this man down. Let's go.
On October 15th, 1887, a Sunday night, the foreman of the jury, as instructed by Judge Parker, reads the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Bass Reeves is once again free. Justice carries on. The system that Bass Reeves believes in works, despite ugly racist attempts to manipulate it. It was around May 15th, 1895. A man named Zachariah Thatch was killed by his traveling partner, a man named George Wilson. Wilson is a career criminal who has been released from a Tennessee prison 1 year earlier. The night of the killing, Wilson is spotted in the Red Dog Saloon in Keokuk Falls, Oklahoma Territory. It's a whiskey joint 1 mile west over the border from the Creek Nation and 1 mile north from the border of the Seminole Nation. Its precise location was for legal reasons. Keokuk Falls was one of the most infamous whiskey towns on the prairie. Later that night, after Wilson stumbled out of the Red Dog Saloon, 2 shots sounded in the dark. Witnesses said they came from where Thatch and Wilson had set up camp for that night. The next morning, a body is found in Rock Creek. The corpse is Zachariah Thatch. He's missing digits from 2 fingers, blown off by gunfire. Worse though, his head has been cracked apart like a melon split open by an axe. Deputy Marshal Bass Reeves arrives a few days later, armed with an arrest warrant. It doesn't take him long to track down Wilson, who is traveling overland with Thatch's wagon and all of his possessions. Wilson claims to the lawman that he's the nephew of Zachariah Thatch and that he's merely watching the wagon and all of his uncle's property while he's off hunting. Trouble for the outlaw is Bass Reeves has brought the corpse of Zachariah Thatch with him. Wilson quickly identifies the body. He even admits that George Wilson is not his real name. He was born James C. Casharego of Conway, Arkansas. But he swears to Bass Reeves that he did not kill Thatch. So, Bass Reeves investigates. He finds a pair of Wilson's pants, rust-stained with blood. The outlaw says he'd hunted rabbit for dinner the night before, and he'd stained his pants butchering the animal. Bass Reeves finds an axe in Wilson's wagon hidden among Thatch's property. It's highly unlikely that Wilson butchered the rabbit with an axe. The facts begin to indict the guilty man. The final clue is the most difficult to discover and thus is also the most damning. Bass Reeves investigates the campsite and finds remains of 2 campfires. One of the fires burned right next to a tree. That's a curious place to build a fire. The Oklahoma soil is parched from all the dry weather they'd seen lately. When Bass Reeves digs into the campfire's ashes, he turns over blood-stained earth. He discovers the murdered man's blood preserved in the soil. James C. Casharego of Conway, Arkansas, a.k.a. George Wilson, is taken to Fort Smith, where he is tried, convicted, and sentenced to die. On July 30th, 1896, Bass Reeves and Ed Reed watch James Casharego step through the gallows trap. He's the last man to be hanged at Fort Smith. The jurisdiction of the Court over Indian Territory comes to an end on September 1st, 1896. Bass Reeves' detective work is certainly cunning and commendable, but the true highlight of the lawman's career, at least according to Bass Reeves, is the manhunt to capture the outlaw Bob Dozier. From what we know, Bob Dozier started out as a farmer. He was smart, handy, and productive. Then, for reasons only he could explain, he decides to become an outlaw. A black outlaw in Indian Territory, he's wildly successful at it. One key to his success, he's an outlaw jack of all trades. He operates land swindles. He steals jewels. He'll rob a poker game that's all big money gamblers. And meanwhile, on the side, he runs a gang that specializes in horse theft. Bob Dozier tends to hit other criminals, which reduces the chances a U.S. Marshal or sheriff will ever get involved. He's smart. Also, since he's known as a violent man, it limits the number of people looking to bear witness against him. His crimes often go unpunished. That is, until Bass Reeves gets a writ. The arrest warrant is to bring the black outlaw Bob Dozier to Fort Smith to stand trial for stealing a horse from a white man named Sam Stratton. The theft occurred 6 months earlier, but 6 months later, after no other deputy marshals can find the outlaw, the writ goes to Bass. He rides out in the dead of winter to find Bob Dozier. It will require months to track down the cunning bandit. You could think of Bob Dozier as like Omar from The Wire, but for the Indian Territory. Finally, Bass catches a cold trail. He works it until it's a warm trail. He gets closer and closer. Bob Dozier hears word that Bass Reeves is hunting him down. The outlaw sends word to Bass Reeves to stop looking for him, or he'll kill the lawman. Bass Reeves sends word back. If Dozier wants to end things, he should just stop running. A few more months pass. Bass Reeves continues to stay on the outlaw's trail. Bob Dozier can't rest. He can't stay anywhere more than a day. He must stay perpetually on the move to avoid capture. The outlaw grows weary as Bass Reeves gets closer and closer. Finally, Bass tracks the outlaw down to a canyon ravine in the Cherokee Hills. But a storm starts to wash away the outlaw's tracks. It's the perfect place to lose the lawman. As a master tracker and former Army scout, Bass Reeves knows this. He decides to take a risky gamble. He leads his posse man down into the ravine, giving up the high ground. It's a nearly fatal gamble. A shot is fired from an unseen rifle. His posse man scatters, leaving their horses in the ravine and Bass all alone. The posse man hides among the tree line. Both lawmen try to spot their ambushers. It has to be Bob Dozier and his men. Bass Reeves stays in the ravine. He lets his eyes adjust to the darkness of nightfall. He watches the trees, scanning for any movement. He spies a figure as it darts between the two trees. He leads it with his Winchester and then fires twice. The figure falls with a pained sound. The gunfire gives away Bass's position. A second unseen man returns fire. Bass Reeves lurches to his side. He makes an anguished sound and falls to the ravine ground. He's back to his old tricks. Rain splatters next to him. Lightning splits the darkness with flashes of light. Bass Reeves lies there, his trap set, waiting for his man to make his move. After a short wait, Bob Dozier laughs against the darkness. He's killed Bass Reeves, and he knows it. He steps out of the trees to inspect his prize. Once he's close enough, Bass Reeves speaks. He orders Bob Dozier to drop his weapon. The outlaw Bob Dozier can't believe he fell for such a schoolboy trap. Bass Reeves orders him again to drop his weapon. Instead, Bob Dozier drops low to a squat to fire at Bass Reeves, who's still lying on the ground. Bass Reeves is faster. He fires first. The bullet tears into Bob Dozier's neck. He's likely dead before he hits the dirt. This was one of the last highlights of Bass Reeves' long career, at least as far as he was concerned. It happened around the same time when everything officially changed, not just for Bass, but for all of America.
I'll stop it right there. We got about another 10, 15 minutes to go, Sarge, but that was a hell of a story.
Oh, yeah. There's only one, man. But back to the other thing about the murder charge. I'd like to remind you that this is the reason why the rule of law and the objective application of law is so important. But you got to remember that Brother Reeves was defended by a colleague who had been a former U.S. attorney by the name of W.H.H. Clayton, colleague and friend. And he was also instrumental in getting the charges against him dismissed. So...
Hello? Well, hey, guys, I think Sarge's phone.
Oh. Wait a minute. Listen to this saying by Bass Reeves. This is what he said. This is a quote. Maybe the law ain't perfect, but it's the only one we got, and without it, we got nothing. That was Bass Reeves, and that's the way he looked. He knew things weren't perfect, but he knew his duty, and he said about doing his duty. And when you talk about other highlights to his life, Dozier wasn't by any means the last significant story, anecdote in his martial life.
No, we're not finished yet. Don't go there, Sarge. I'm
in 1889, I hope you get to that story in 1889 and in 1890. Two stories you haven't covered yet that I think also highlight who this man was.
Yeah. Well, what I see from him, he was a stickler for law. He was a great lawman. They tried to take him down, but he followed the rule and the letter of the law. He was a lawman, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, probably ever.
Hard to argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, 3,000 arrests and all that. I mean, he was doing this thing. They brought him even with this last example they just talked about, they brought him the hardest. This was another black man. Hey, you need to go get this dude. We can't get him. We need you to go get him. And he did. Almost got killed doing it.
Yeah. Well, are you going to talk about the Tom Story gang of horse thieves he went after in Paris, Texas?
Well, I don't know. Depend on what they're talking about in the story. Let me continue the story, Sarge. We'll see. But we're going to bump heads on one of the things they're going to bring up. But I'll get back into it.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States.
In 1868, a few years after the end of the Civil War, the United States ratified the 14th Amendment. It guarantees equal protection under the law to all citizens of the U.S.
Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Of course, the law is one thing, reality is another. By the time Bass Reeves caught Bob Dozier, the case of Plessy versus Ferguson had made its way to the Supreme Court. In short, a mixed-race man in New Orleans boarded a train and sat in a whites-only seat. When the conductor forced the man from his seat, it was in direct violation of his 14th Amendment rights. But the court decided the train company was well within its rights to discriminate on the basis of race. This was the beginning of separate but equal. And it was the end of a black lawman enforcing the laws of this land. How could he, if he wasn't equal to the citizens he arrested? For 3 decades, Bass Reeves rides as a federal lawman. He risks his life and limb for the law-abiding people of the Indian Territory, regardless of race, creed, class, or color. He lives according to America's most deeply revered values, and he feels betrayed when the nation's lawmakers and the justices of the Supreme Court are the ones to put him back in his place. And they dare to call it progress and the coming of civilization.
Cartier, Rolex, Gucci, Prada, Jordan, Adidas, Bottega Veneta. At eBay, it's real or it's getting the fake out. eBay's team of luxury rejected. Ensure your next purchase is the real.
Grip life by the wheel and educational investments to enrich the black trail.
From where it had been moving. It was, when he went west, it was moving in an upward trajectory.
Do you feel that Bass Reeves would have felt that the Supreme Court betrayed his values? I mean, here's the highest court in the law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, the Supreme Court, there were a bunch of racists. So, of course, they betrayed him completely. He didn't die pleased with the way the country was moving. He couldn't, because it was moving backwards from where it had been moving. It was, when he went west, it was moving in an upward trajectory. He was bringing law and order, and they had opportunity. If you were a free man, a fair man, a just man, there was work for you. And he did that without any change of anything except the people who were making the decisions. Everything turned backwards because they betrayed the country. Not just black people, they betrayed the whole country when they did that, because they turned the whole country in a direction that we're still coming out of. The whole country got consumed with the industry of bigotry. All the commercial activities that support bigotry is what we are now stuck with. So no, he had to feel betrayed, but he also had to feel that the country still had the potential to correct itself.
Judge Parker's court officially ends its session on September 1st, 1896. The new federal appointees at Fort Smith are now increasingly Democrats. They set about dismantling Reconstruction, fast as they can. A few months after his last gavel strike, Judge Parker dies on November 17th, 1896. He was 58 years old. He passes away 8 months to the day after he watched Cherokee Bill hang from his gallows, the last great outlaw he'd sentenced to die. After Judge Parker is gone, Bass Reeves operates primarily out of the federal courthouse down in Paris, Texas. It'll soon be time for him to move on, but not before he makes one more attempt at ensuring justice for black men in America. At one point, while Bass Reeves works down in the Lone Star State, a white rancher named John Ashley shoots and kills his black neighbor. Soon after that, Ashley's livestock starts to mysteriously die. Then, his house is burned down. To get justice of their own, Ashley's neighbors go hunting for black people to punish. They find a few black farmers out on the road. There's no evidence that they're the guilty party. The crowd needs no evidence. They hang the black men from trees. And then they go looking for more. Most of the black community flees the area. As they attempt to reach safety, the sheriff arrests 6 young black men he feels are responsible, and he holds them in custody in his jail. A crowd forms, intent on more Texas justice. They plan to lynch the men. First, they'll need to break into the county jail and yank the black men out of their cells where they're locked up. U.S. deputy marshals are called in to protect the jail. The tallest, toughest-looking marshal among them is also the blackest. That night, the lynch mob loses to Bass Reeves, and 6 black men keep their lives.
Now, to me, Sarge, and everybody,
Bass Reeves believes in.
To me, that short story right there, what they told, and I know they get this from various sources. To me, that's his greatest thing he did. He saved those young men's lives. To me, everybody has their own opinion. My opinion, it's one of the greatest things he did, but he was still going by the law. which I have no problem with at that point in his life. But that's some powerful shit. He said, y'all ain't finna come up in here and get these boys and hang these boys. He stood strong on that. For me, that's one of the greatest things he did.
Justice far more than his former master did, who coincidentally was a Texas lawmaker. Bass also believes in justice more than his white neighbors do, the ones who reserve it for the races they respect and pursue justice conditionally. To Bass Reeves, justice isn't just blind, it isn't even personal. It's what we all live under. It's what holds us together. It's the tie that binds. Without the law, there is no we. His faith in justice was first tested when he was on trial himself, yet it was strengthened when he was acquitted. Now he must face the biggest test of his deep faith in the law. One day, Ben Reeves, the son of Bass, comes home to find his wife in bed with another man. He flies into a rage. He beats the man and then kills his wife. After he attempts to take his own life and his gun misfires, he takes off. Now he's a wanted man. An arrest warrant is soon drawn up. Marshal Bennett doesn't know what to do. No deputy marshal wants to hunt down the son of Bass Reeves. The father, though, does what he's raised his son to respect. Bass Reeves reportedly tells the marshal,
"Give me the writ."
It doesn't take the lawman father long to find his son. He tracks him down to a house. Some people beg Bass Reeves to go easy on his boy. Bass Reeves pays them no mind. He speaks directly to his son. According to Reverend Charles Davis, a Creek freedman, Bass Reeves shouted to his boy,
"Now, Benny, you are no more my son. You committed a crime, and I have a warrant in my pocket for you, a bench warrant, either to bring you in dead or alive, and I'm gonna take you in today, one way or the other. You can come out with your hands up, or else your whole body will be down."
Ben Reeves.
Now, I just told you the highest point for me. My opinion, Sarge, this is the lowest point. I don't give a damn. I'm not going to arrest my own son. Somebody else can do it. One of my partners can do it. One of my whoever. I'm not going to do this, but that actually shows how much this dude believed in the law. So much he went to his own son, got involved in the situation, said, "Nigga, I'm gonna arrest you, I'm gonna kill you." Sarge, I don't know. That sounds very coonish to me. This is my own opinion. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that ever. Somebody else gonna have to make that arrest. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just not. But he felt he should. I won't. Go ahead, Sarge. You trying to say something?
All right. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, even when I don't agree with it. But I'm going to remind you again as to what Bass Reeves said, or is said to have, a quote that he said to have made. Maybe the law ain't perfect, but it's the only one we got, and without it, we got nothing. Now, I'd like to submit this for your consideration. Bass Reeves was no fool. He'd been born a slave, okay? He experienced discrimination in Fort Smith, for instance, when a white cop did not like the idea of him bringing in a white man in custody and in handcuffs. And he almost got into a shootout with this white cop in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And the only thing that prevented him probably from killing that man was the U.S. Marshal Fagan intervened and said, "No, this man is doing his duty under my auspices because I'm the U.S. Marshal for this territory, and he's just doing his duty." Now, this man was acutely aware of racism and discrimination like few of us are or can be. And I'd like to submit to you this for your consideration. Had that job been farmed out to another deputy who might not be of the same race and might not have the same sensibilities, that the law should be objectively applied to all persons at all times, no matter the circumstances, it is quite possible that his son couldn't even possibly have come back alive. So maybe he figured by me doing the job myself,
I understand that point.
I am more likely to ensure my son's survival. And the way it worked out for him, as you know what his eventual disposition of his case was, I think that Bass Reeves made a very wise choice.
Well, I'm going to disagree, but we'll go and see how it turns out. And I understand what you're saying too. That's a good point. What you just said too.
He comes out from where he was hiding, his hands raised high over his head. It has to be one of the saddest days of Bass Reeves' life. And he does it for justice. His commitment is that great. Then America betrays him and his belief in the nation. Like his father before him, Ben Reeves has to face a murder trial. He's tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison in Leavenworth. When Bass Reeves goes to arrest his son, Ben Reeves, for murder, I wondered if you were the law, would you come after me like that?
That's a very...
Well, you guys got to understand that these two guys that are doing the show, the younger guy is the son, the older guy is the father. So that's why he asked him that question. So I'll continue.
Right, difficult question. But the answer is no.
Yeah, but I do think it is certainly worth considering, like I said, he got the writ. If I get the writ, I'm going to fulfill the obligation. He asked for the writ, I think, in part, to protect his own son, to ensure...
There's no evidence of that, Sarge. There's no evidence of that, Sarge. There's no evidence of that.
That's just my opinion, but he could make sure that his son would get due process at the point of arrest, because he made the arrest.
Right. I accept your opinion, and I duly noted it and said that is a good way to think about it. Hey, if I arrest you, you ain't going to get killed and blah, 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 blah. So I duly noted and said, that's a good point. But I'm not finna go do what he did like that. I send my friend, my homie, or somebody, man, just go get this guy. I'm not going to get involved, but I will still make sure that he could be safe if that's what the issue is. But his son got life in prison, and he arrested his son. That's some bullshit to me. That's coon shit to me. Very coonish. But we only got a couple more minutes. Let me finish it up, Sarge, and then I'm going to open it up, and y'all niggas can get wild. Hold on.
I wouldn't do anything to help you get away. I wouldn't do anything to help you hide. And I wouldn't do anything to help them catch you.
That's a fair deal. I'll take that. The cowboy era ends, and we've talked about how the racism comes to the West. But what do you imagine for black men who they lost that cowboy era? They lose that freedom. Just specifically them. Like, it seems so sad, to get this moment of like 2 decades of actual freedom and then to have that taken away after dedicating yourself to enlarging America. They committed themselves to the American enterprise, and then this is their return. This is their repayment.
Yeah, they believe what the government told them, that you are now free and full citizens. Mm-hmm. And they acted on it, and they went west. The level of betrayal that was felt is what we're working against now.
It's a reasonable position to be skeptical of America if you're black or native.
Yeah.
Why is America so committed to allowing bigotry, like the American people who do go for that? And I'm not suggesting all Americans are like this. I do know that it is not the majority of Americans who feel this way, but yet the impulse is so strong that it is recognizable and expected, and you know what it's going to be becoming. So why is that? What about that feeling? What does bigotry provide that a person's willing to go against their own self-interest to have that?
It's a satisfaction with a failed life.
God damn. There it is. 1907 was the year Oklahoma joined the Union. It was also the same year the Indian Territory was declared no more. What this means for Bass Reeves is he's out of a job. There's no longer any need for a deputy marshal in the territory since there's no longer a territory. He's fired by the march of what the new white folks in town call progress. The next year, in 1908, Bass Reeves becomes a beat cop in Muskogee, Oklahoma. He's forced to only work in the black section of town. He's no longer allowed to arrest white citizens or have any legal authority over them. At one time, he could shoot them dead. Now, he can't even shoot them a mean look. By 1908, Bass Reeves is worn down and limps from an old gunshot wound. After nearly 2 years as a beat cop, he retires from the Muskogee Police in 1909. By 1910, Bass Reeves is dead. He dies on January 12th at home. The last of the real Wild West passes away with him. When Bass Reeves dies, his son Ben is still locked up behind bars in federal prison. Perhaps as a way to pay their respects to the departed legendary lawman, friends of Bass start to work to free his son. They advocate for him with the authorities. And finally, in 1914, Bass Reeves' son's life sentence is commuted. Bass Reeves was without a doubt America's greatest lawman, a proud tradition, a legend of the law. And what did he get for it? When he needed someone, he was treated like a dog. He believed in America more than America did. Here was a lawman so unswerving from justice and so relentless in his pursuit of it that he entered people's dreams. One man who attempted to kill his wife had a dream that Bass Reeves was looking for him, hunting him down. When he woke up, he went to the authorities and turned himself in. That's a true story. That's the sort of hold Bass Reeves had on the people and the land that he policed. A black cop is a difficult job, to say the least. It's a trope in hip-hop, movies, online culture. Everyone knows the black cop is to be avoided. But also, the black cop represents the idea of race and justice paired together, even if the black cop doesn't guarantee real racial justice just because he or she is black. When the good people arrived in Oklahoma with their racism and their law books, Bass Reeves had to take a backseat to progress. But until then, he was an incorruptible, indomitable law of the land, what nearly everyone would call a good cop. The prairie was certainly more fair and just when law and order were maintained by the hanging Judge Isaac Parker and the greatest lawman the West ever knew, Bass Reeves.
Well, all right. You guys, that is a story of Bass Reeves. I'm sure there's some other stories out there. That shit was compelling to me. Great story. Sarge, what do you think? Right now, I'm going to open these lines. I see Brother Joshua on the line, brother. I'm going to open up these lines.
This is a couple of anecdotal stories I'd like to close with before we end it. Now, I know you've probably heard of the notorious bandit queen, a white woman named Belle Starr. Have you heard of her? You ever heard that name before?
No.
They did a movie about her, so she was well known in the Hollywood legend lore. She was wanted on a federal arrest warrant. She heard that Bass Reeves was being sent to get her. When she heard that, she turned herself in, not to Bass Reeves, but to the authorities, because she heard Bass Reeves was after her. And the story about Tom Story in 1889, well, the gang of horse thieves, Belle Starr was notorious, okay? She was big-time woman outlaw. And Tom Story, Reeves was assigned to Paris, Texas, and he went after the Tom Story gang of horse thieves. He was a notorious horse thief. Horse thievery was a big thing, as you well know. You get death penalty in a lot of places for stealing somebody's horse, because that might mean they might die somewhere because they didn't have a way to get back without their horse, without dying of thirst. So anyway, he raided along the route that the gang was known to use, alone as usual, and surprise Story with the arrest warrant. The guy panicked and drew his gun, and you know you fucking up when you do that with Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves, you pressed and shot him dead. The rest of the gang took off, disbanded, and were never heard from again. So, yeah, I mean, the number of anecdotal stories about Bass Reeves could go on forever. You could literally do a TV series about this man, like 94 arrests a week. Come on.
Well, there was TV
you could do a TV series about this
but
man. It could be multi-year TV series with like 16 episodes a season, and you could probably take you about, 8-9 years to do it all justice. I mean,
well, let me say this. Go ahead. if you want to end it.
But I just want to sum up like this. I mean, I know that the storyteller, man, he did a very good job, by the way. I really enjoyed the way he gave the story. But he is putting a great emphasis on the racism and the injustices that this man endured, and that is appropriate to do. But I would also like to point out that there were white men who saw his merit, had faith in him, and gave him the opportunity, and defended him when it was appropriate to defend him. So that is part of the story, too. You can't tell one side without also telling the other, because they both fit. And that gives you a little bit better context.
Okay. You want a cake for that white man. I got you. I'm going to open up these lines.
Bacon was one of them. He didn't know the man from Adam other than his reputation. He lived in the 5 civilized tribes. He could speak Muskogee, Creek, Seminole, Cherokee, and Muskogee. And they said, hey, he knew the territory. He was a good shot. He knew how to track. He only knew his reputation. He didn't know his conduct, but he hired him on what he saw as merit, not his race, not one way or the other. And he recommended him to the judge. The federal judge there took a look at, heard the story, said, yes, this black man has merit. I'm the federal judge here. I'm going to appoint him to be a deputy U.S. Marshal. And the rest is history.
Okay. Well, Deep wants to call in, and what I said, I'm going to open up these lines. Hey, hear what you're saying.
Q&A session is over. All participants are unmuted.
Everybody's opening, and I don't try to stay long at all. Try to give some history. Sarge, it was a great story, right, Sarge? Great story. The way they did the story.
This is one of my favorites, man. I mean, you talk about Bass Reeves, man. You talk about one of my favorite stories of all time.
Yeah,
I can read about Bass Reeves now until doomsday, man. The guy was he was like something out of a I don't know. If you made a Western character a superhero, Bass Reeves would probably fit the bill.
Yeah, good story. Complicated story. They tried to get my brother, and he held on to the law and everything. But I think at some point, for me, I'm not finna do that. Go arrest my son. I ain't finna do that. I'll let someone else do that. But everything besides that, I mean, he was on point. He's doing his thing, and so with that, I could go with that. So like I said, I open up the lines. Anybody want to chime in on this conversation? Any other things that's on your mind? Speak up. Hey, I want to thank you, Sarge, for calling in. The next one I'm gonna do is kind of a more gutter kind of cat that was on the other side of the law, but I kind of have an affinity for those type of cats in the West. But next week I'm gonna do a more guy who was on the other side of the program, but still a great story though. So tune in, you guys, for that. And like I said, I don't be long. I'm not some of these other cats that do 6-7 hours or something and playing Tucker Carlson. That's not what I'm about. So all lines are open. Anybody wants to speak? Deep. I thought I put it. Deep, did you get the number, Deep? Or, he said he wanted to call in. So, Deep, you can call in now. Lines are open. There are 12, 15. How many people on it? There's a lot of people on the line. And so, for those that have listened to the show, you can talk about Bass Reeves of the show. I thought it was very interesting. Or you could bring up new things that you want to bring up. So it's all open, man. Anybody can get in. Joshua, I talked to you months ago about the Bass Reeves thing. You said you would have something to say. So if you want to say it, now's the time, brother. So Yeah, man, I'm leaving it open and
by the way, we didn't mention the Lone Ranger connection. You care to mention that?
I did not.
Do we want to explore that a little bit before we open lines up?
Well, the lines are already open, but if you want to explore that, go ahead.
Well, look, the story is, I remember I watched Bill O'Reilly, and he did a story, The Legends and Lies, which is 2015 television series, and he cites evidence that Bass Reeves was the basis of the Lone Ranger story and myth and tale, and he pointed out the similarities between Bass Reeves and the character Lone Ranger and Bass Reeves. Now, others say that's not true, but let's look at the evidence for the case. Bass Reeves frequently worked by himself. In fact, he probably worked by himself more often than he worked in concert with others, although he did work in concert with others. But most of his arrests, certainly some of the most dangerous ones, he did by himself. The Lone Ranger wears a black mask. Now, need I say anything about, the illusion between black skin and a black mask? You've got a man who is known for the headgear he wears as being very distinctive. He wore, even though he would wear a white hat, he wore a big black classical Stetson that he could be identified from a long way away. He was a crack, dead shot shooter. And if you look at Tonto, there's the association that Bass Reeves had with the civilized, so-called civilized tribes, Cherokee, the Muskogee, the Choctaw. That's the association with the Indian there. So I think that, I'm not saying it is. I'm still not absolutely convinced it is, but there certainly is a solid case to make that he could have been the inspiration for the Lone Ranger. Given the racism of the time, you couldn't make a black Western superhero. So they had to kind of allude to the fact that there was some connection with maybe a black man.
Well, I agree with you on that, Sarge. I'm not going to argue, but I want some participation from the TRS family. All you guys here, you're listening, you got Sarge spitting. Great history. I would have to agree, Sarge. I don't know if it was all taken from him, but I do agree that some elements were probably taken and put into for the TV or whatever. So, yeah, I agree with that because, Bass
Reeves regularly used Indian trackers and Indian scouts to help him make arrests. So he regularly associated, when he did not go by himself, many of the aides he used were Indian trackers, scouts, and Indian lawmen. So there's that too. And of course, we know who Tonto was. Kemosabe and all that other jive, so there's that.
Right. But you also notice that in any other stories that they just told on this, they didn't mention a partner. He went by himself a lot. A
lot, but not always. Not always.
Well,
I say
I'm talking about
more often than not, but certainly not always.
Well, I'm talking about in the stories that we heard tonight. We didn't hear a partner or this or that. He did his thing by himself. So I mean, I don't know.
More significant stories, after all, it's always more beguiling when you got a lone man against insurmountable odds. So I would imagine that,
it is called the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, those probably going to be a little bit more compelling. So I guess you would have to expect people would emphasize those stories. But when you make 3,000 arrests, you can believe this. He didn't do them all alone.
I got you. Well, Brother Yashua was trying to say something. You did, Brother Yashua? You trying to say something?
Not really.
Well, why did I hear your dang microphone? Well, I saw your microphone, but I didn't hear it. That's all. Okay, that's cool.
No, well, let me say this though, Howard. This is right quick. A compelling story. You know what's funny about history that they say that during the West, is what we call the West. That was the only time when black men, particularly black males at that time, had free range in defending himself. Check that out. That's the only time in history that he has free range to defend himself. Because Bass Reeves wasn't the only black male with a gun. During that, there were a lot of black men who had guns and would defend themselves against white men who gave them slack. So I find that in history very interesting that at that time, that was one of the few times in history, as far as I know, one of the only times in history where black men would shoot white men. Some of them became outlaws, which they did. There's stories about black men who became outlaws due to them circumstances, and that's a story you should probably run to eventually. But yeah, I find that
we're gonna get on
very
that next week, brother. We're gonna get on that next week, brother.
And he had a wake up call. Mr. Reeves had a wake up call, and his wake up call was confronting the ideal of this thing called white supremacy, and why for some reason, why white males felt that we were allowing these Negroes to be uppity, carry guns, shoot us down. So we must go back to what we was, and we must go back and control these Negroes and control the system that we apparently, what they felt as white men, that they had invented and started. I find that a very interesting time in history that they would do this to black people when black people tried to be just citizens, and they couldn't let that be. They said, no, we can't let that be. We're the white man. We can't let that happen. And so he had a wake-up call. And, yeah, Bass Reeves had a wake-up call. Good show, Howard. That was a very good show, bro. Very serious about that.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, bro. Sarge, you got to admit, he got a good point. But Brother D wanted to talk. I saw him on the line. Your line is open. I have all lines open, D. You want to chime in, brother, go ahead. As you see, my dog is barking in the background. But Beep, you there? I guess not. Sarge, you want to rebut to that?
Until Deep comes on, I certainly cannot dismiss anything that Yahshua just said because it's indisputable. I mean, talking about the late 19th century, Plessy versus Ferguson was decided in 1896. I mean, and before that, you had the stirrings of the end of Reconstruction and the reinstatement of the black codes and Jim Crow laws in the South, and to the extent that the Confederacy could restore the status ante status quo, they were doing it all throughout the South. So I sure as hell can't dismiss it. I'm simply saying that there were other currents that were at play as well, and we need to acknowledge those too, as well as acknowledging what was done. This remarkable man, and it's a shame that he had to be that remarkable to get recognition. He couldn't just been like, the average lawman and be accepted. No, he probably did have to be as exceptional as he was, but nonetheless, he was. And he was recognized for being what he was. There was no doubt about it. Even the people who hated his guts knew he was a damn good lawman and a man of courage, integrity, and honor. So I think all of that is important. Those qualities have always been respected in the United States. Always. Hell, even slave masters would recognize the slave's worth if he had it. Look at this guy, this Confederate colonel. I mean, he taught his man how to shoot, and he was such a good shot. He entered him in turkey shooting contests. So look, there are things that are universal, and all people recognize, and all people who have worth and merit. And the key thing for me, the most important thing for me is not what I already know about the former endemic, systemic, institutionalized racism in the United States, but also the fact that in the United States has always had a belief, or at least an ideal, an aspiration to believe in merit, worth, proving yourself. And that's what Bass Reeves did to a T, as well as anybody who has ever lived. And I'm going to celebrate this brother and tell everybody I can about him because of it. I mean, there's few people in United States history I admire more than Bass Reeves. Few.
But I think, Sarge, with all due respect, I think you missed what the brother Joshua was saying. And let's take what you said, all-time great American, this all-time great. They still tried to railroad his ass. They still tried to get him, bro. And that's what I think Joshua was saying. I'm not trying to speak to Joshua, but even among the great lawmen holding up the law, doing all
and
this.
that's the right, and that's the point, Howard. And after all that, if for a man who tried to overlook me, I mean, remember he came from a slave. I mean, he was a son of a slave too. He wasn't just a slave himself, he was a son of a slave as well. So my point is that here's a man that tried to overlook all of that in the case of justice and law. Check that out. And they wouldn't let him forget.
And they still tried to get his ass.
Right. And they still tried to get him. And now
arrest his own damn son for murder.
And check this out. And then now I'm wondering why they don't want to make a movie about it. They want to make the movie about Bass Reeves, but they don't want to do it. You know why? Because of his activities and his relationships and his ability to kill white men. See, and I said, that's why they don't want to make the movie. Here was a dude who had free range to do what he had to do. Not say I'm applauding him for killing white men. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying that he had free range as a human being to uphold the law, regardless of his race and his mind. And he wanted to do that, but they would not let him forget who he was. They said, no, you still a Negro, Mr. Reeves. I'm sorry. You did well in catching fugitives, but you still a Negro.
Well,
and that's the sad part.
Netflix just announced that they're doing a series spinoff in the 1883 vein. You can look it up on YouTube. They got the trailer there. There's a proposed Netflix spinoff on Bass Reeves from the 1883 setup, which is associated with the Yellowstone series. So they are, in fact, coming out with a Netflix adaptation of Bass Reeves' life.
Right.
Yeah, but that should be whitewashed, Sarge.
Right,
but you got to get what the brother's saying.
I think we got to wait till we see it first, don't you think?
No, I already know it's going to be what. They ain't going to tell the story.
When people get set up in the Old West, you ever heard of a cowboy named Tom Horn? He was a white man, he was a gunman. And he got set up accused of a murder, and they hanged his ass.
Hey, Sarge. Howard, let me say this to Sarge. How about the black man that killed, who was it? He killed Billy the Kid. Am I correct? Well, who was that he killed? He came there to rob it, and the black man shot him.
My understanding, Pat Garrett. But where did you hear it was a black man that killed Billy the Kid?
I thought it was. I forgot the name of the villain.
I didn't hear
it was lawman Pat Garrett, and Pat Garrett is supposed to have set Billy the Kid up in order to kill him.
Yeah, okay. I didn't hear it was a black man, Joshua.
I didn't hear it was a black man.
No.
If you got some information that I don't have, I'd like to hear it, but I've never heard anything other than Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid.
What's the good?
Can you hear me, you guys? Can you hear me?
One of them got shot. He got shot in Tulsa. He got killed in Tulsa.
Okay. All right. I'll wait.
Let me find that, then I'll get back to y'all. Let me find that, then I'll get back to y'all.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear it.
All right.
Yeah, well, go ahead, D. So what you want to add, bro?
Oh, what I wanted to add is, since my man Sarge was giving the history lesson on the whole transgression, or should I say the migration of the Black Westerner in the Americas, shouldn't we talk about the Spanish-American War in, what was that, 1892?
1998. 1898.
1898, right.
Yeah.
And Sarge, do you remember not a sitcom, do you remember the serial that was called the Cisco Kid?
Sure, that was in the 1950s, man, on TV.
Exactly. And guess what that was mimicking?
What was that?
Same Cowboys, the Cisco Kid. That came out in the 50s. That was it wasn't a pilot, it was a series.
No, it was a series.
And I
watched it.
It was, right. I used to watch it too. And what it was, Howard, it was he was like a lawman, but he was like a rogue lawman, but he had his honcho, which was called Tonto. Now, if you look at the narrative,
his sidekick was a guy named Pancho.
Pancho, right. But what it was mimicked after was the Lone Ranger and Tonto.
Oh, okay.
If you think about it, Sarge, Pancho, Tonto, and the Lone Ranger had the little Batman mask, right? Or the little Robin mask, where it just covered his eyes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the same exact thing. Now, what I wanted to allude to, Howard, in referencing that, was that they always do the Black Cowboy Parade. They do that all across. They don't do that in every city, but they do that in certain cities, right?
Right.
That's referencing everything that you put on that video. So what we're being told is, not from the history books, what we're being told through rituals is that obviously there were Black cowboys here in the Americas way before there were white cowboys. Now, I want to tie this to what Yasha was saying in terms of the racist element. In my opinion, I'm not saying this is true, this is just my opinion, I don't think the racist element was that prevalent at that time, because we're given these instances where we had Black lawmen. Now, let's fast forward. Did anybody watch the movie Django?
Yeah.
Do you think Django is not referencing the exact same thing?
It was Jamie. Yeah, but that kind of dealt more with the South than it did with the West. I mean,
of course it did. Of course it did.
Yeah,
however,
Django was in the South. But if you listen to the story, D, listen, you're right.
It's showing you the migration. It's showing you the migration.
And when they got control of the West, that's when it came in, hey, we can't have these niggas out here acting like they acting out here.
Exactly.
That's when that came in and said, yo, we got to get these niggas up in control out here. What y'all niggas on the West doing?
And see,
and
here's
so
the thing.
a change came.
The reason why I brought that up, Howard, is because Quentin Tarantino is one of my favorite directors. Because when I watch movies, I always look at who directs the movies. Because if you look at who directs the movies, then when you see them make other movies, you always know who made it. Because they always do the same themes over and over again. So when Quentin Tarantino made that, and Jamie Foxx said this, when they asked him why he accepted that role, here's what Jamie Foxx said. Man, because nobody else wanted the role, and he took it. And he was like, man, I'm a black hero. Why wouldn't I take that role? And a lot of people missed that interview when they saw the movie Django because they were so caught up in Samuel Jackson's character and Leonardo DiCaprio's character that they missed the whole point of Jamie Foxx's character. He was that cowboy, to reference what Joshua was saying. He was that cowboy that was shooting white folks and getting paid. And guess who gave him the game? A white boy. Gave him the game. Watch the movie. And when the white boy told him, he was like, you mean I can kill white folks and get paid? And he was like, yes, you can do that. And he was like, oh, I'm on board. That's your whole cowboy story right there in that movie. That's the whole story. But they're not telling you that's the story. They're just painting a picture of a movie and pushing it off as if it's fiction. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this was just some anomaly that was going on at one point in time in history. But no, that's how Hollywood works. Hollywood actually tells you what has gone on and what's going to happen. Hollywood is better than the news because Hollywood tells you the truth and they show it to you. They show it to you. Go back and watch.
Well, check it out, D.
I agree with you.
D. Okay. Hold up, D. I agree with you. I agree with you totally. They'll tell the truth, but they'll cloak it in, entertainment and bullshit. Yeah, fiction. And so, yeah, I agree with you. What you're saying? Hey, that story. What you're saying is that guy in Django, even though it was represented in the South. Who knows where Django? I don't know. I didn't read the book. If there is a book or anything.
Django?
Who knows where he came from? I don't know that they represented that in the hill. He might have came from the West, but he's
the cowboy.
But you're saying the story of being a free slave. He was a cowboy, this and that, and he wasn't dealing with the bullshit. So
Look at the story. Look at the story.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, D.
He was a slave.
Yeah.
The dude came and bought him, and he told him, okay, and he told the white folks. The white man, look at the movie. The white man told the white folks, oh, I bought him. He's free. He's free. And then they go
I think where you're going, D.
If you listen to the dialogue of
Stars might not agree, though. Stars might not agree with you.
What I'm saying, though, Howard, if you listen to the dialogue of the movie, it's consistent with what Joshua is saying. It's consistent with what you're saying. It's consistent with what Sarge is saying. It's consistent. What they did was they placed it in the South to throw you off the scent.
Can I add something if you don't mind?
Of course, Miss Lady. You are always welcome and just the sound
now
of
we
your
got to
voice.
remember the 1880s, the Trail of Tears, where they marked the indigenous people from the Southwest.
And no, that was from Georgia into Florida.
It was what?
You talk about the 5 tribes.
And that was in 1830. That was from 1830 to about 1850.
You're talking about the Cherokees, the
y'all want to let us?
It wasn't in the late 1980s. It was in 1830 under Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson.
It was Andrew Jackson. Yeah, we know Andrew Jackson was one of the most racist. But do y'all want to let her get it out? Is that okay? Let her get it out.
I'm sorry. Sister.
I think if you would look, you'll see that there was a movement of indigenous people out of the Southwest area, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, all the way to Oklahoma. And I'm talking about the late 1800s, 1880, maybe 1875. There might have been another trek earlier. I'm not sure, but I do know during the 1880s, I had a family member who was a fur trapper who worked with other black horsemen, farmers that led that trek. Okay, so there were cowboys. The term cowboys, hey, what can I say? It was a term used for
It
black.
was a derogative term. We know that was a derogative term back in the day. If you want to teach them that, I don't know if they know that.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. Well, actually, let's Sister Ottawa.
Y'all go ahead. I add that because the history goes back much further than Reconstruction.
But no, let's get on the term cowboy, Sister Ottawa. Do you say that was in the beginning when it first? Do you say that was a derogative term, or what? What is your knowledge on that? Are you there, Sister Ottawa? Was that Sister Ottawa?
Yeah, that was her.
Are you? Put herself on mute.
Yeah, that was her.
She put herself on mute.
From my understanding, and I'm not a damn truth meter at all, but from my readings in history, that was a derogatory term in the beginning when they first started using cowboy, because there were a lot of black men that were doing this type of, remember, it was a type of work. Every cowboy wasn't a gunslinger robbing trains. Cowboys were like, roping steers and, you know what I'm saying, sorry, doing horses, training horses, and it wasn't, the majority weren't criminals. They did farming type things.
Cowboys were never referenced as criminals. Cowboys actually is synonymous with the frontiersmen of the Americas, because they were the ones that went to certain areas, doesn't matter where they were. They established themselves, and then they had to fight off cattle rustlers, they had to fight off the sheriff, they had to fight off the poachers, the corrupted government, and that's where you got the gunslinging from, where you were fighting for your land and your resources.
I've heard that theory of the origin of cowboy to mean a disparaging term for the black men who work with cattle and cows. But my understanding is it is also a nearly direct translation of the Spanish word vaquero, which means someone who works with cows, a young person who works with cows.
Right.
So,
and
I mean, you can take your pick as to which you'd like to believe, but the term vaquero goes back to the early 18th century.
And Sarge, that's why I brought up Spanish-American War. That's why I brought that up.
Right. But let me, and then there was a lot of black people in Mexico at the time, too. I think the story didn't touch on it, so we didn't touch on it. But from what I heard, it was a derogatory term. The white East, and I'm talking about East Coast white people, they the ones that termed them cowboys. He's working with cows, they boy, and there was a lot of people, not of their hue, not of their thing. They named them that. Now, you can say vaqueros and all that. Vaqueros don't sound like cowboy to me. But that's what I heard. I don't know
Spanish word for cow.
Huh?
Vaca is a Spanish word for cow.
Go back, Howard. Right. Go back and study the frontier movement. That's where you get your answer.
But I'm saying, have you guys heard that was a derogatory term because there was a lot of people of color?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that story.
Oh, you never heard that?
Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard a lot of
Not me. I haven't.
Oh, well, you never heard it. Sarge has heard it. I think that was where Sister Ottawa was going to go. I've heard it. I don't know if Yashua's still on the line, if he's heard it. Yeah, I heard it was initially a derogatory term.
But Howard,
yes,
let me do this.
Absolutely.
Let me
they
go
called
back to
even aged men boys. So we know that when you use the term cowboy, who you talking about? You talking about black men. I don't know if you know anything about Nat Love. He was called Deadwood Dick. He was a real individual. So, I there are these few names that they pulled out, but believe you me, there was a plethora of African men who controlled grazing animals that connected with the indigenous people in this country, who dealt with animals, buffaloes, horses, you name it. This is not, the skill set was a skill that black men had, dealing with animals. So I don't know.
Sister Ottawa, so you heard it as being a derogatory term in the beginning.
But it's not fictional.
Sister Ottawa, you heard of it being. Let me ask you. So you heard of it, just to be clear. So you heard of it being a derogatory term in the beginning, that's what I heard. Or read.
Boy is a reference that was used just like girl and gal. They'll call your grandmother girl. They'll call your great-great-great-grandfather a boy. So it's always been derogatory.
There you go.
People do.
I don't know. Yeah.
Call you gal and girl and boy, and you're none of that. You're a mature man or woman.
Right. Yeah, she's right. I don't know. D, I don't know if you.
And Sister Adua,
we're just
don't
trying to
forget
give you some
female.
information, D.
Absolutely.
Don't forget the female. And that's all they call women now, the female. That's female too.
But there were black women who could handle a weapon, ride a horse better than some of the men. So, they talk about black women that had rifles up under their skirts. I got a couple of stories like that in my family. I'm sure you do too.
Well, last week we talked about Mary Fields, didn't we?
Actually, next week, I just want to get this out of here, and I'm going to let y'all talk. Just let me get this out, Sister Ottawa, and I'm going to let you guys go. Sister Ottawa brought up Nat Love, and next week, we're going to do Nat Love next week. Same type of thing from the same people, giving a kind of a documentary about Nat Love. Another great story. But she's right when you have the origins of some of this English terms and stuff that they put on us, cowboy. And like I said, I'm going to say it again, from my understanding, derogatory as hell at first. Because when those Eastern white men and those Southern white men got out to the West, they had that mindset, and they saw a lot of colored people of color, black people, native people, Mexican people that were in that culture, and they gave it a fucking name with the boy at the end. That's just how they got down. So I don't know how I don't know East Coast, how you never heard that, but even Sarge, Trump-loving ass, heard that. So I don't know. I
also heard the name Vaquero. I give both of them equal weight.
Well, nigga, now
Howard,
you're trying to...
Can I have a suggestion? Could you present this first female black, woman millionaire, who preceded Madam C.J. Walker, arguably? Her name is Mary Ellen Pleasant. She was born in Georgia and ended up in San Francisco, and she was very much a philanthropist toward black causes and gave a lot of money to that.
Oh, what? No, I've never, actually, I'm ashamed to say it, I've never heard of her before.
I know.
Scared to say that. What's her name? I was going to say C.J. Walker. I didn't know.
No, it was Mary Ellen Pleasant. Pleasant.
Well, how did she become a millionaire? What was she involved in?
She was a capitalist. She, how did she do it? I read about her she worked on the Underground Railroad. She was a friend and supporter of John Brown and was well known among abolitionists. She helped women who lived in California during the California Gold Rush to stay safe, become self-sufficient. After the Civil War, she won several civil rights victories that resulted in her being called the mother of human rights in California. So how she started as, she portrayed herself as a housekeeper and a cook long after she became wealthy, but she used those roles to get to know wealthy citizens and gain information for her investments. So she made money.
Is that the movie I seen on Netflix or something? She was married to a man. They wasn't really married, but she was buying up everything, and later she kind of lost a little.
She pretended to be the housekeeper of these rich white people in order to maintain her fortune.
Yeah, I think that's
this movie. Oh, I didn't know it was on Netflix. Is it still on? I'll look for it.
I think, sorry, did you see it on Netflix, the movie?
I've heard of it. I can't remember the title, but I do recall some things about it.
They tried to say she was a madam. They tried to say she was, doing prostitutes and stuff. They used to come to her house, try to take her to jail and all that. Is that the one you're talking about, Miss Lady?
I don't know, but I think she made, as all too often, she probably ended up very poor at the end of her giving and giving.
Well, yeah, they took all the shit from her. They did.
Yes, they took from her. And there's allegedly like a little monument where her house was. I don't know if it's still there in San Francisco with her name or a tree or something.
She was married to a white man.
Well, I don't know, but it says in the 1870s.
She was. Yes.
She was married
She made
to a
the
white man.
acquaintance of Thomas Bell, a wealthy banker and capitalist, which helped her make money and keep her riches and true financial status a secret. So she spent her money and developed plans to build a large mansion. And then she assumed the role of housekeeper.
It was in San Francisco, right?
Right.
Yeah.
San Francisco,
Right. San Francisco.
You got to see the movie.
When did you see the movie?
I think it was on Netflix. Was it on Netflix, Joshua? I seen that movie some dang on where.
I saw the documentary.
It was a documentary. Maybe it was a documentary. Yeah, I don't remember where I saw it.
There's a movie too. But what I saw was a documentary. But they did it dirty. They ended up doing it dirty in the end.
Yeah, they took all this shit. They took everything from her. She was trying to hide it. She didn't want the people to know. I think she was married to the white man or something. And
she portrayed herself as a housekeeper, so they wouldn't know she had all that money.
Which was smart. Yeah.
And there was some rumblings going around that she was a madam or something. But she was a businesswoman. She was involved in a lot of things. The white people didn't like it because she was doing her thing, and they found a way to take her down. I think after her husband died, they found a way to take her shit from. They took everything from her. Dang, I wish I could remember. Why you didn't bring this up when I watched the dang on show, Miss Lady? God dog it.
Well, I mean,
I can't remember how
I just heard about her a couple of years ago. I remember reading about her, and then because I've been meaning, to do more research about her, but life happens. So since you bring up historical people that were very forward thinking and very courageous and very taking charge of their life situation, and I thought.
You're real muffled now, Miss Lady.
Oh, okay. I'm on my Bluetooth, and is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to look for this on Netflix. I didn't know it was on Netflix. When did you look at it?
I think it was on Netflix. That was a couple of years ago. Joshua, maybe, where did you sit? I think we might have seen the same thing. She had a big home.
She had a mansion.
San Francisco.
Well,
she had a big.
I saw the documentary. I saw the documentary on YouTube. As a matter of fact, I posted the documentary in the chat, but I don't know if these knuckleheads even looked at it. So,
maybe that's where I saw it. I can't remember if it was on YouTube, Netflix, or something, but I saw it.
Yeah.
I know exactly the sister she's talking about. They took everything from her. They took it all.
Yeah, they took everything from her.
She had given a lot of resources to black groups to help, advance, black people's situation. A lot of money.
That was
So I'm sure they found out about that.
That was a good find, lady. And the reason why they took so much from her was because she was an abolitionist. So you have to look at this from the time of her birth, which was 1815, and then we had the SARS can reference this. We had the Civil War in 1863 to 65, I believe, or maybe a little bit earlier, and that's what she grew up in.
1861, hostilities broke out.
1861, right.
Yeah.
So at that time, she was in adulthood. And then when she got her wealth and prospered, which we need to talk about, there were many black people that prospered during that time.
Right. But she was on the West Coast now. She was on the West Coast.
Not at that time. She migrated.
She migrated. She migrated to the West. And I remember
She
from the documentary.
was born a slave. She was born a slave.
Right. She migrated to the West Coast.
That's my point.
I think she might have been mixed too. I'm not sure. Joshua probably could tell you more. But I remember she migrated to the West Coast. They were trying to call her a madam. They were saying that she was a madam.
Running a brothel.
Running a brothel. She had this big mansion. She was very involved in politics.
Matter of fact, her mansion is still in San Francisco. It's still there.
Oh, I know what you said. She was left money by her first husband and invested it wisely. Her businesses included laundries, dairy, and exclusive restaurants, all which were quite lucrative in a city filled with miners and single businessmen. In the 1890 census, she listed her occupation as capitalist. So then she
they tried. They got her.
Can we get
they lied on her and got her.
Of $30 million. Thomas Bell was the great love of her life and business partner, the white man, who helped her to build up to $30 million back then, which would be worth what? Shoot, what? About 400, 500 million, a billion?
Probably more than that. Probably more than that today. But let me tell you
this.
And
who are you all talking
Miss
about?
Lady.
Who?
What was her name?
Her husband.
Mary.
Her husband.
Mary. She wants to know her name. Mary Ellen Pleasant. Like, pleasantry, like pleasant.
I've seen that documentary. It's a good story, but they went after that sister falsely, badly. They defamed her, called her a madam. They did all kind of stuff to her, and that big old mansion they took from her, and that was a messed up story how they did that, sister. That was messed up.
And you better believe that white man, that Thomas Bell, that helped her build her wealth, he knew what she was doing, and he co-signed, and he helped her as well, because she had goals. She had been born a slave and escaped under the Fugitive Slave Act. And she helped a lot of black folks.
Oh, wait a minute, Miss Lady. Let's talk about Thomas Bell, who was an investment banker, and he was co-founder of the Bank of California.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, he was co-founder of the Bank of California. And he started his career with Baron Forbes. Listen to what I'm saying. Baron Forbes and Company. This is in 1992. Listen to the names. Baron Forbes and Company.
We got it.
Okay. And in the Yay area, because I know that's where you from, that's where I was born and raised, even though I ain't been there since 2017. What did they used to call the telephone company in California?
Bell.
Pac Bell.
That was Pacific Bell. Pacific Bell.
Yep.
Do your homework.
Sure did.
Do your homework. Now,
so I wonder, Mr. Forbes, I have a question. Do you think Mr. Forbes knew what his partner, Mr. Bell, was doing with Mary Ellen?
Of course.
Uh-huh. So
they were married, Miss Lady. They were married.
Miss Lady, money knows money. Don't ever forget that. When you get to
they
a
knew
certain
she
level,
was donating. So Mr. Forbes knew she was donating to the black cause.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Money knows money. Because
he was a staple in the black community on the West, at least from the documentary or movie I saw. I can't remember if it was a documentary or movie. I think
okay. Let me give you guys an example. Let me give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Spelman College. And I'm here. I've been in Georgia from California.
That nigga Sarge ain't here, man.
From the Bay Area. Wait a minute. Hold up, Howard. I want Miss Lady to hear this. I want Yashua to hear this because I know they already know. And Sarge probably already knows this too. And you probably do too, Howard, and a whole bunch of other people listening. Okay, I've been in Georgia since 2003. I'm from San Francisco and Oakland. Spelman College is named after the Rockefeller family, who the first Rockefeller married. The maiden name of his wife was Spelman, and that's where you get the name Spelman College.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a discussion about black entrepreneurs, and we discussed this woman at length.
Okay, there it is.
I remember it now.
There it is.
We talk about all kind of black entrepreneurs, and she was one of the ones that was selected as an example of a black woman entrepreneur in the mid to late 19th century.
Right. Roughly 1890, to be exact.
Right. So I remember that now. I remember the discussion we had.
Yeah. So, Howard, let's tie this in to your whole cowboy talk. This is how history gets flipped, because we get these images of history, but then when we do the research, we find out who the actual persons are and how their identity gets flipped into something else. So, going back to what the sister that was on before, who was talking about the Cowboys and the Trail of Tears and that whole piece, we can tie this all together. Because when we talk about and she was talking about the Trail of Tears, which is the Cherokees, the Seminoles, the Choctaws, the Muskogees, and the Ho-Chunks, how that transition with the intermingling of the cowboys in the Americas with the Indians, and how we transition from that joint into these black people, which Miss Lady so eloquently blessed us with. The Madam C.J. Walker, and what she was talking about further with hold on a second, with Mary Ellen Pleasant, and all these things are intermingled. They're not separate. They're joined together. But history will tell us that they're all separate. So the Long Ranger is different from the Black Cowboys, but the Black Cowboys were similar to the Long Rangers, and so on and so forth. It just causes confusion.
And then they hide the history of the cowboys, say like in the circus or rodeos, the shows, the different horse shows that they do, any kind of animal, what do I want to call that? A lot of the history of the black cowboy is embedded in the history of the rodeos and those types of things. It gets lost in that because they turned it into entertainment for white folks, okay? And they took the best, the skilled horse people and placed them there. So, it's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is the lesson that we have to learn from other cultures, is that we have to understand the importance of knowing history. Because there's a movie that I know everybody's seen. The most important part of the movie is the beginning. The movie is called 1983.
Hey, D.
They give
Hey, D.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick? And I'm going to back out, man, probably for the rest of the night. When you guys are talking about the history of black cowboys and black people in the West, that's why I wanted to do this series of shows and bring that up, because it is important, and it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. When you had the slave, some people runaway slaves, or even right after that, and they went to the West. A lot of them were very successful. That's one of the things that they don't talk about. Like the woman that Miss Lady brought up. A lot of them were very successful. A lot of them were some of the greatest cowboys ever that no movies are made about. Some of them are the greatest lawmen ever in the Wild Wild West that they don't talk about. And that's why, and some of them were some of the greatest damn gangsters that are not talked about. So you got a gambit of everything, but that's how people are, humans are.
And don't forget the 9th and 10th Cavalry, which is 20% of the cavalry in the West.
Exactly. So that's why I wanted to do this series and bring up a lot of these people, because they don't get enough talked about enough, and what they went through, their struggles and things on the West Coast, and so I think it's important. There's a lot of good stories. We've all heard these stories when we were young and probably forgot, but they're great stories, man. And I'm just glad that you guys actually know and know about these stories, can add to them, participate to bring them out even more so to other people that may not know. So I appreciate everybody for chiming in, participating, and it gives me a little something extra to try to go on next week and bring something else or another person that we could talk about. I appreciate everybody, man. I'm for real on that one. Thank you.
Again, like I said, you might want to look at the 9th and 10th Cavalry. They got a story. This story is about as legendary as Bass Reeves, man. The game of tame in the West, as they want to put it. I mean, you might be offended by that term, but nonetheless, the 9th and 10th Cavalry had a key role in it, and so did the 24th Infantry, too. They were a black infantry regiment, and they were key to it as well. The West.
Howard, we appreciate you bringing up these historical figures. I didn't know I had read a little bit about Mr. Bass, but I didn't know a lot about him. And just, the historical figures, and, it's part of this country. It's the fabric of part of the fabric of this country. It's not taught, it's not spoken about, and we're learning. It's educational, it's informative, and it's a pleasant conversation. And I want to say I really appreciate it a lot, and I'm sure other people do as well.
And I'd like to add something. Howard, great job. I love the fact that you delve into history and do what you do. But I would also like to give my kudos to Miss Lady for bringing up Mary Ellen Pleasant, because I had to look that up. As much as I love history, I love ancient history, the esoteric, all that. I study all that. I've been doing that for 40 years. And when I looked up Mary Ellen Pleasant, Miss Lady, I didn't know anything about this woman. And you taught me something tonight. And I'm one of those people. When you show me something I don't know, man, I love you for it. And I appreciate that. And I think one of the beautiful things about conversations like this is that we all learn something. Even though we can be talking about different things in relationship to the topic, we can see how it all comes together and just goes into the same pot. So Mary Ellen Pleasant, you know, I gotta include her in my memoirs because I missed her. I don't know how I missed her, but she slipped by me. But thanks to Miss Lady, my girl from the 510, she laced us with that game, and now we got it. And to everybody else that's listening, and to the other, I'm sorry, I don't want to get her name wrong. So
Lady Ottawa, Sister Ottawa.
Sister Ottawa. With what she laced us with, I had to go do some research on that because I'm one of those kind of people where when somebody tells me something I don't know, I gotta go look it up. And that's what I do. I don't dispute it. I don't confront it. I just be like, ooh, I didn't know that. Let me go look that up. So Sister Ottawa made me look up the 5 tribes. Then I had to figure that one out. Then I had to figure out how the 5 tribes related to the Cowboys. Then Miss Lady came with Mary Ellen Pleasant. I was like, ooh, this is wonderful.
Yeah, they brought a lot of heat. They brought a lot of heat tonight. They brought a lot of heat.
That's all I wanted to say.
Something, brother.
I loved it.
Can I say something? If you don't mind. I think we need to be mindful when we use that term, when we talk about indigenous people and talk about the 5 civilized tribes. We have to understand what is being said in that. It was the people who accommodated the Europeans and who also allowed them to
these were the people that assimilated into the culture.
Exactly. And the Europeans
extent of owning slaves.
So are you saying the 5 civilized tribes were like 5 white tribes? Is that what y'all saying?
Slaves, Howard.
Yes.
I know they own slaves. I know that.
Because a lot of the indigenous people have been whitened, and that comes from miscegenation. And that there's some history that says that the European could become an indigenous person with $5. Okay? So a lot of them went into these 5 civilized tribes. But listen, there are so many families of indigenous people that, we don't even think the names mean anything, like Turner and James, and there are names that
do you think
you a lot.
Sister Ottawa, do you think that a lot of us, like Sarge said, they own slaves too, but you also had some of those five indigenous tribes. Some of those 5. Can you hear me?
Okay, you said
some of those 5 indigenous tribes own slaves too, which is a fact. But some of them also took in black people that ran away and did. So they also did that too. So there is a direct blood relation for some people when it comes to that also. And I think today's time now, people make a confusion and saying, well, we're those people, which, no, I disagree with it. There's a difference. But I'm with Sarge. I know that they owned slaves, but there were also some who took in slaves too, Sarge, and viewed them as their own people, and took them into the flock, so to speak, as.
Yes, so there are people with black and slave ancestry who are also members, citizens of some of these Indian tribes. That's how they became citizens of these Indian tribes, and they have a claim to these Seminole, Choctaw, Cherokee tribe citizenship.
But Sarge, weren't many of them born into it?
Yes, as slaves, and also as free association marriages.
As slaves and as free association people, but Sarge, you got to tell the truth. But when it comes to things like voting or getting things, well, I don't mean like voting, but I mean voting within that community, or going to the U.S. government and doing something. Even if you were a slave or if they accepted you in, your ass wasn't a part of the decisions that they made for the tribe. That's a fact too. Your ass wasn't a part of it.
But mostly, yeah, you're right. For the most part, yeah. But you got to remember too that people who are subject to tribal jurisdiction did not become United States citizens until 1924.
Right, but Sarge, this is what I wanted to ask you, Sarge. If you're born into it and you're part of the geography based on the law, you're
but they not their law, not their law. You're talking you trying to put U.S. law on how they got down. They didn't look at it like that.
You got to remember they signed treaties with the United States, and in those treaties, in some cases, that was part of the treaty, so they had to observe it.
Sarge, can you please turn down the mic? Because every time you talk, I have to turn my volume real low. Then I have to turn it back up, turn it down.
Turn the mic down. Turn that dang mic down.
Okay. So here's what I'm saying.
Sorry, the statement that you just made is incorrect. The Europeans came here to the Americas. They went into treaties with the indigenous. The indigenous didn't go into the treaty with them.
Correct.
They already had the land. We got to be clear about what we're saying. Okay?
Well, I am using as a reference for that last statement a book called Red versus Black Conflict and Accommodation in a Post-Civil War Indian Territory, and it goes through what the treaty said, that black freedmen who were part of for instance, the Cherokee Nation were in fact declared citizens and entitled to vote and hold tribal office. That's part of the treaty they signed with the United States Cherokee Nation.
Different families. I mean, there are many stories about African men who escaped from slavery and went into indigenous communities and became a part of that, a productive, contributing individual to that nation, married into that nation, became chiefs. I mean, there are all kinds of stories that talk about how people come together. And that's what this is about. We're talking about history and what the movement looked like. It's a continuous thing. It didn't,
Well, I'm not sure. I think now I'm not sure, but I think what you might be referring to is that some of the Cherokee slaves who got away and escaped, who were slaves and got away from the Cherokee people and got away during the Civil War, but then they came back to the Cherokee Nation after 1867, they were not allowed Cherokee citizenship. And then the tribal chiefs asked the federal government to kick them off the Cherokee reservations and lands. So I think you might be thinking about
talking about one of the civilized tribes. I'm talking about there are all kinds of indigenous people throughout this country, United States of America. The North, Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, Southwest, Northwest, all of that. There was indigenous people throughout. Listen, the history says that 100 million indigenous people were murdered here on this land. 100 million
living in North America. I think you think about South America. There weren't that many. No, not North America.
Wait a minute, sir. She does have a point about there was so many indigenous tribes. They all had their different rules and laws about the way they accepted outsiders, the way they wanted to deal with these white folk trying to take their shit.
That's true.
Yeah, so she's right about that. Now, 100 million.
No, there weren't 100 million Indians living in North America. She's thinking about South America. There were that many, not in North America.
Well,
the highest number that could have been was 20 million, and that's too high, really.
Okay, but
I don't know about that. So 20 million sound a little low to me. That sounds a little low to me.
The Battle of Lexington, the Battle of Bull Run, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Battle of this and that. Those battles were with indigenous people and the Europeans, okay? In the North America.
I don't know, so I don't know about 100 million, so I think 20 million way too low.
But it's damn near close because they wiped out nations.
Not even close, not 100 million, no way.
I don't know.
There were only 34 million white people living in the United States during the time of the Civil War.
Well, who had guns? God damn it.
There were the population of the United States at the time of the Civil War was 34 million or so.
Sorry, they were wiping motherfuckers out with guns, diseases, all kinds of.
There wasn't anywhere close to 100 million Indians living on a North American part of the country.
I'm not saying it might not have been 100 million, but I think it was more than 20 million.
That were given. How many indigenous people died from the blankets that were given to them? Indigenous people.
Smallpox.
All right. Let me ask you a question.
That killed a lot of people, Sarge.
Let me ask.
Yeah, but 100 million, no. I'm not saying it wasn't a lot of people.
Wait a minute. We're not talking about in no one period of time. I'm talking about collectively, Sarge.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm speaking to. That's
exactly. Okay,
well, how much? Well, what's the number you put on it, Sarge? Hold on.
I believe, based upon everything I've read, and I've read quite a bit about the indigenous North American Indian population from East Coast to West Coast, the number of Indians living in the North American part of the continent, not the South. There were tens of millions living south of the border. But in the north part of the country, there were about 8 to 10 million coast to coast. That includes the East Coast, Eastern Seaboard, Central Plains, and the southwest part of the United States.
Short. I think that's kind of short. I really do.
I'm telling you, it was no higher than that.
I don't know where you get that number from, Sarge. I think that's kind of short.
We're talking about people that
thinking about South America, where there were tens of millions of Indians living, but not on the North American continent.
I don't know. I think that's short.
And the heaviest concentration of them was on the eastern seaboard. the Iroquois, the Huron, the Iroquois Confederation tribes. That's where most of them were living, on the eastern seaboard of the United States. The Plains Indians were really sparsely populated, and the ones in the southwest part of the
Europeans first met them on the East Coast, sir. That's where they came in, on the Atlantic Ocean.
That's where they were concentrated, on the eastern
So
seaboard.
that's where the first battle, that's where the first contact to the indigenous people, that's where it hit first, on the East Coast. And then they moved inward, inland. And then they moved to the west as they began to gain territory. You had the Missouri Compromise. You had all this shit going on that was moving people.
So, Sarge, this is why I say I don't know about your numbers. Hold on, D. If you look at how scientists in the history say that they came in through the Alaskan, the Bering Strait, whatever, came on down.
Land bridge between Asia and North America.
That's on the west coast of the United States, correct?
Right.
So how do you get that the majority of them were on the East Coast when they came through the west coast of the United States? It's just one issue that I wanted to bring up.
Migration over centuries.
I understand that, but when people get to a new land, the majority are going to settle where they first get at. That's where the majority going to be at. That would be on the west, first of all. Second of all, that 8 to 10 million number from the west to the east seems, and we're just talking about North America, that seemed a little low to me by maybe, I would say, I don't know. I haven't looked up the numbers, but that seems kind of a little low to me, especially seeing that.
I understand why you're saying that, but look, the estimates among so-called scholars have ranged wildly. Now, the numbers that Sister Ottawa quoted are over 100 million. I've heard that number given. I've also heard numbers by reputable scholars that are as low as 6 to 8 million. So you got a wild variation among people doing the research. You got to pick your number between 6 and 8 million and 112 or so million. But if you look at the anthropological record that they've been able to dig up on the ground, you look at the dispersion of the peoples when Europeans came and were keeping records. Remember, Europeans are the record keepers. They write things down. They take censuses and numbers, and they quantify them. That's why that's what I mean. I mean, what are you going to say? We got no record, or you got some record? What are you going to believe? So you got to I'm
saying that those Europeans.
You can't. You know what? If you just I'm just sitting here. You talking about the Bering Strait? Who the hell would go that far north to come back down to the equator? That's some bullshit you saying. You can go around the planet easy by going being at the equator, because the land masses are closest. Wait a minute. The land masses are closest to one another at the equator.
Well, Sister Ottawa, the reason why they say the Bering Strait
talking about is way the hell out of the way to come down, to come back down. Why go that way? I know people always say the Bering Strait, is why they say it. But that's a difficult and treacherous terrain to even try to migrate through.
Well, all of them didn't make it. All of them didn't come through there. That's why you got Eskimos and shit in Alaska. But the reason why that is accepted as the way they came is because they didn't have the boats sturdy enough to cross the seas. They couldn't cross the seas.
Wait a minute. How did they transport So many Africans.
That happened thousands and thousands of years later. Thousands and thousands of years.
15,000 years ago, to be precise.
Okay, well, why don't we get into? Why can't we, talk about a certain time period? I don't know why. This is why we don't have no clarity about history, because we don't even use dates. We just throw shit out. We've got to be able to talk about time. What time?
Well,
what time?
Okay, can I add something? In the time frame, like Sarge said, 15, 20,000 years ago is when they were crossing the Bering Straits walking. And that took tens of thousands of years for them to do that. The slave trade happened way later. That's in our modern time. We're talking tens of thousands of years before that, when those people populated this land and came through the Bering Straits.
Unmuted.
Equipped enough to go across an ocean, they would die. That shit wasn't gonna happen. Boats wouldn't make it. And so, you're right about time periods. We get time periods mixed up and stuff. So you're right about that. But the crossing of the Bering Straits and that stuff happened. If I'm sorry, you said 15,000 years ago.
About at least 15 to maybe 20,000 years ago. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't as rapid as European expansion once the Europeans discovered the Americas. No, it wasn't anywhere near that rapid. It was literally thousands of years. And then you had a north-south split between these groups who landed on the West Coast, and then they went south to South America. Then you had another group that went from west to east over those thousands of year period. You guys got to realize how adaptable man is to environment. They would settle for a while. Maybe some ecological change occurred that said, we got to get up out of here and move somewhere else if we're going to survive. And this happens over thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, if I can add something real quick. The land masses are closest at the North Pole, not at the equator. And the first contact between what we call white people and indigenous were Vikings.
But even that was in the 12th century, or in the 9th century or so.
Yeah, the Vikings came to the Americas way hundreds of years before. Yeah,
well, before y'all go down this path, let me say this right here. If you're listening on YouTube, I'm getting ready to cut the stream off, and Howard, y'all can continue to talk, and then you can be a little bit more open with what you're saying, because it's not going to be on YouTube. But y'all ain't got to worry about none about that human migration, because we got a superhero that has laser coming out of his eyes. The 45th president of the United States of America.
Go see the psychiatrist about that Trump derangement syndrome now, Tyrone. It might
y'all go ahead.
Okay, Tyrone. Okay.
Hey, you need to play that. You need to play the clip. You need to play the clip before before it's over.
How could you just tell us what continents are at the North Pole that are closest together, if you would, for me?
If you look at
America needs a
map.
superhero.
Well, thank you for that, Tyrone. It was totally out of place, but thank you for that, brother. What was? If you look at, she asked you a question, Joe.
Yeah, if you look at a proper map, right, Greenland and all those.